The show where anything goes. Motivation, mindset, recovery, philosophy, and life. We become who we are through what we experience. We all have a story, and this is My Backstory with Josh Boyer.
I was looking a little bit, and I shared this with previous guests, that I don't do a lot of research. I don't like to know too much about the person that I'm interviewing, because I feel like it takes away a little bit of my own curiosity. It's like, well, I already know that. I already read that, or I already saw that. So this is a way for me to learn about you at the same time that my guests, or that my audience are learning about you. From what I did see on social media and whatnot, super fascinating stuff. You know what I mean? As far as like the elements of the earth and like your relationship to money and like how that's like it's all related, how you can generate basically anything you want. I learned about your CrossFit, getting into that, and you're like, I didn't really even train. I just showed up and crushed it. And it's funny because most people hearing that are closed off to those kinds of ideas would probably be like, that's total bullshit. This guy's full of shit.
Of course.
And I'm not that guy. So like for me, it's like, no, like when I was hearing you share those words, I was like, you know what? There's truth in that. There's definite truth in that. And I was never a CrossFitter. I've done some CrossFit, but never like that to that level. But there's things I've done in my life that I didn't train for, and I was able to do them just because I tapped into a different energy source. So that was important to me. It made sense to me. So I want you to share your story. Who is Raw? How did you come to be like the way you see the world? Why is that? And and I want to go down the rabbit hole with you, man.
Great.
So take it away, brother.
So I'll go in chronological order for the most part. Yeah. But I might be jumping back and forth. So I'm going to start off by saying that I think the reason why I'm bizarre in a way is because I haven't watched TV in 20 years.
That's awesome.
So at 17, I've always been able to kind of see through the matrix and ask questions and just make my own decisions. But at 17, I just determined that the TV was just a complete waste and brain manipulation. So I haven't really even seen what everybody else sees, what everybody else is programmed. So since then, I've always been doing stuff just based on my own internal dialogue, right? My it's internal locus of control. Everything's coming from inside. I don't have external inputs, and it just seems like I'm doing everything weird compared to everybody else, but it's not on purpose. Right. I'm just not being programmed the way everybody else is being programmed. So, like the way I dress is just based on comfort. I've never had to dress up. I've also never had a job. I've never had a full-time job in my life. So I've never had the relationship with money that I think is the standard for most.
Where did that come from, though? I mean, was your dad or your mom like esoteric in any way, or were they kind of part of the matrix or part of the system that you see most people being?
Completely matrix.
Oh, wow.
And I think that a lot of me asking questions had to do with disappointments, because, I mean, when you actually, I remember when my father took me down in the basement and told me that Santa Claus wasn't real, and that's like the beginning of like, wait a minute, so it's just cool to lie to people? It's just like that's an accepted thing? Yeah. Because up until that point, I feel like all my classmates were telling me Santa Claus wasn't real. And this is like grade school, Yep. So we're going way back. And I was holding true to my faith and my trust that this person, this experience is the way that it is. And then my dad also is a very honest person. And I think for that, because of how honest he is, I find it impossible to lie. And I, at the time, just held that was normal, right? Like I wasn't raised where it was okay to tell white lies or anything. And so when he told me that, it was just like, wow, like a huge disappointment. And it wasn't like, it affected me. Yeah. So as a kid, so I want to go way back. So there's other things happening as a kid. I started realizing that my intention was directly related to the outcome of experiences. And as a kid, you do like mischievous stuff, like knock garbage cans over with your bike. At one point, we were like hitting mailboxes out of a car window with our hockey stick. Yeah. These are just examples of some of the bad stuff that I did, and it seemed like I was unable to do anything, quote, bad without hurting myself or destroying my own property. So if I like knocked over a garbage can on my bike, literally 1 second later, I would like fall on my face. And so I have this combination of not being able to tell lies, like even like casual conversation, like how are you, like I don't just say I'm good, right? So like radical honesty mixed with a knowledge that my intention equals the outcome, and also starting to see that everybody else wasn't this way, right?
Yeah.
So then by the time I'm like going into high school and I'm starting to, you get your driver's license, that's a big like going out into the real world. I start noticing not everyone else is this way. So then I start just completely rejecting the system, like right away. And this is just all based on my own observation that like how I am isn't how they are, and how they are isn't resonant with how I know that I am.
Did you feel a sense of judgment at all? Like, when you looked at other people, was it more like a sense of like sadness for kind of where they were? Or was it more like, I don't want to be like that? Or what was it like? What viewpoint were you like? What vantage point were you looking at people from?
It's completely like a militant vegetarian looks at someone who eats meat.
It's a great analogy.
As a 17, 16, 18, 19-year-old,
yeah,
that's the mindset that you're in, right? So there's a lot of hatred towards the government, towards corporations, towards unhealthy people, fat people, and I'm using the language that I would use back then, right? I don't talk about these things in this manner now. So and the unhealthy people, that was completely a projection. It's not like I was mad at them. I was mad at the system that creates sickness. Right. And because when I grew up, my parents tried to protect me, but it was very like matrixy, like you can have the orange soda, but you can't have Pepsi and you can have candy that's fruit flavored, but don't eat Snickers bars. It was like very weird because none of that matters. It's all garbage and poison.
Totally.
So by the time I, in middle school, ate candy for 3 years straight. I think that's why I'm like kind of small and a little bit frail. Which then led me to, and I also played hockey. So I was playing a full contact sport while also being like this.
Malnourished.
Yeah. Yeah. And so by the time I was getting to the point in hockey where you fight,
yeah,
and I had a lot of anger that I was releasing on the ice because I got bullied because I was malnourished and the smallest kid in school. I was always the smallest kid in school. No hair on my body. I didn't even grow armpit hair till I was 19 years old.
That's crazy.
So I have like this mixture of getting back at the bullies, and I started fighting and I started destroying the other team. That was my role in hockey. So I was working out to do that. And so I just taught myself how to train, taught myself how to get bigger, taught myself how to fight. And I became a bit of a destroyer, and I was really good at it. And so I got onto really good hockey teams. We won nationals 2 or 3 times in college. And actually the first time we won nationals, I wrote it down in a journal. And this is like before The Secret or any of these movies came out, right? Like I'm 19, 20 years old, and I wrote it down. I was in class, and I just like had just like a feeling of alignment. So it's not like a wish or a desire to do something. It's just this feeling of being connected to the reality where my team was winning nationals. Yep. right? And it was like not anywhere close to the end of the season. And I just felt that, and I wrote it down. Like, I forget the exact words, but it was something about us winning nationals. And I felt that chord. And so I get this feeling where I can connect to quote future realities, because they're happening now. If you want to perceive the world non-linearly, like non-linear time, from a which a lot of scientists talk about, right? That linear time is an illusion. So if that's the case, then that means that all realities that are going to exist and or has existed is happening currently. And so I can feel these chords connecting these realities. So that was another example of me feeling something that I didn't really understand, and then it came to be, right? I think the season before we like lost most every game, like except for like 3 of them. And then this season, we won nationals. And then we were like first place the next 3 years.
Did you share that with anybody? Did you share like your vision or like your feeling or the flow of that with like any of your teammates? Mm-mm. Like, I have a strong sense that we're going to win nationals this year. Or was it something you just kept to yourself?
I mean, it was like as the season progressed, that was our goal. Like, but I wasn't able to speak like this until maybe 3 years ago. 2017 is when I noticed that now in public, people are able to mention the word consciousness. People are able to mention the word energy without sounding like a weirdo. Yeah, it's a trip. You see the big shift, I think, happening. And I think that's pretty accurate around 2017. Especially in the military community, where I've noticed it the most, where you had guys, myself included, being a veteran, that were just so closed off, like, oh, that hippie bullshit, whatever. And now you see a lot of them, even on Instagram, you'll see some of their posts talking about energy and kindness and consciousness and like being the violent hippies, and like, like they're waking up, and it's like, it's exciting to watch. It's exciting to see that, because for me, I felt kind of cheated by the fact that I was not allowed to really expand my mind when I was younger. My parents were very religious, so it was like, that was the way forward. Like, you just believed in God, and if you didn't, you're going to hell. And like, there was a lot of shame associated with that, a lot of like guilt. And when I got older and started questioning things, I was like, fuck, man, I feel so cheated by that. And it's like, you know what? But now, like, as an adult, and I have kids, it's like, I can just do it differently with them and be like, no, you guys question everything. That's the Santa Claus scenario.
Totally, dude. I just told my son the other day about, I don't think it was Santa Claus. He knew Santa Claus wasn't real. I think it was the Easter Bunny. And he was like, no, I really believed in the Easter Bunny. I was like, you're joking, right? He's like, no, I'm serious. And so my wife's like, babe, are you like, and I was like, he can't believe in that. Come on. Like, that's ridiculous, So it's kind of a weird balance as a parent. Like, you don't want to kill a kid's sense of wonder and a sense of like, like I remember Christmas as a kid being so excited by it, being so like, oh, when's Santa going to come? And like this and that. And there was great memories associated to that. But then there's the other part of me that's like, that's a total lie. It's total bullshit. Like, so where do you find that balance? Or where would you, if you had a kid, how would you do it with your kid? Would you never tell them about Santa Claus? Would you never celebrate like any of the holidays or the traditional way of celebrating the holidays?
Right. Yeah. I mean, because if you start digging down to what these holidays represent, you're literally just looking at corporate materialism, like pushing materialism onto the culture with these made up lies that they can indoctrinate their kids into, which will then indoctrinate their kids. And it's just been going on for generation after generation. And I don't have kids, so it's really easy for me to say these things. I just want to make it clear that I understand if I had a family, which I also don't believe in, like there's a reason why I don't have kids. Right. Things might be different, but it's all kind of, it's a program, and it's a program that we all subscribe to. And because your neighbors and everybody else subscribes to it, we feel like because it's normal, it's right. And normal and correct, or normal and what I should do, those are two separate things.
Right.
So I definitely, like, even though like your child has to go to school where everybody else believes in Santa Claus and everyone else is doing thing, treat the kids nowadays, especially, which a lot of parents, if we're being open to these conversations, we need to realize that kids are not just kids. Like, they're actually another version of you. They're your cells that are having a life experience, and there's your consciousness going through them, but there's an illusion of separateness. And so they're also born, which I didn't really explain that very well. I would have to explain like what happens if we remove cells from our body. There's plenty of studies where people get cells removed from their body, and then the cells are like transported many miles away, and the emotional state that you're in is representative in the cells. Right. You can cut hair off your head, and 6 months later, it's still reacting to what your body's experiencing. And
that's what deja vu is? I think, because like I used to think that deja vu was like, because I grew up in the church, right? It was like everything was like about God, and there was no like past lives. It was like, this is your life, and then you die and you go to heaven or hell or whatever, and that was it. But I started to come up with the belief of like, if I'm having deja vu, like I have been here before, I've definitely seen this time and place before. What makes the most sense to me is that cells have memory. So it's like at some point in time, like whether it been a past lifetime or whatever, I was here. I had to have been. How am I having this experience? How do you think that's deja vu at all? Like what you're explaining?
Yeah, you're explaining what I'm explaining for sure. And just to get clear, because I didn't really go over what my adult life has consisted of, I know of all of this stuff because I ended up owning several gyms, and I went to school for psychology and exercise science, and I've been studying about all of this other stuff the whole entire time. And so I've got a really good understanding of the human experience. And I'm not just like a kid that that thinks about this stuff for the last 2 years. Been kind of closeted studying this stuff for 20 years.
How did you prevent yourself as a kid from going fucking crazy? Because I feel like in a lot of ways, I've struggled with like anxiety. And I think a lot of times my anxiety and panic attacks and whatever, a lot of that is associated with the feeling of losing control, the feeling of like being having no control over all the craziness that is going on around us. And I feel like for you being where you were as a kid, number one, you were way ahead of your time. And I think that was in Michigan, right, where you were? Mm-hmm. And I don't think Michigan is on the same playing field with California, where California has always been historically more open to ideas and like they're more forward, you know? And Michigan's more, from what I perceive, is more like closed off and very like structured and rigid, and that's that. So it seems like you would be the complete oddball, and that would make most people go fucking crazy.
I was always the oddball, and I still am. Yeah. So luckily I had the sport of hockey where I could go crazy and not go to jail. And I could hurt people and break bones. Yep. And like literally spend many hours every single week where my complete concentration was to hurt other people. And I got rewarded for it. Right. And I could fight for no reason at all. Like complete gloves off, helmets off, fighting. If people don't know what hockey is, whatever they're seeing on TV, there's like a couple levels before the pros. There's like what are called juniors, which are kids that are 16 to 21 years old. Yeah. And things are a little bit, they used to be 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. They changed it all because now we have smartphones that record everything. So rules have to change. Yeah. But when I was there, you could try to kill other people. That was like the intent. Like it wasn't like, oh, we're gonna hurt this guy a little bit, or I'm just gonna push him off the puck. It was like outright, I want to kill this person with the weapons that I have, which was a hockey stick and your body. Right. And I think that I did enough of that. I did a lot of that. So I probably have inflicted enough violence to last me like 10 lifetimes of needing to do any more of that. Right. So I have no...
So if not for that outlet, you probably would have been going.
Yeah, nuts. I mean, I was fighting in street fights also.
Right.
I never started any fights, but it seemed like I was fighting all the time.
Yeah.
Because of me being the oddball. So you're talking about me being the oddball. I would walk into parties, and it was just like I would just get attacked, by multiple guys. Luckily, I won most all of these because I was just a fighting machine.
Yeah.
But that led me to like not have to do that anymore, right? Like it didn't stick. I graduated beyond where it started just not feeling good, like my knuckles pressing into somebody else's skull at a very high velocity. Like that feeling now just makes me like, where like before it used to be like I would crave that feeling. So I did go crazy.
I want to bring something up real quick because it's on the topic. The school shooting that just happened, I know you don't watch TV, but I'm sure you heard about it, that just happened here in California, in Santa Clarita, right? There was a 16-year-old boy, I think he was 16, and went to the school, shot I think 6 people. And I was having a conversation with my son, and I feel like it's a conversation that needs to be had like more often. Like you talking about being the oddball, it's like, what about that kid? Was he the oddball? Probably. He was probably like an intelligent kid that didn't fit in. He was probably ahead of his time, and was like mentally tortured in some ways, because he wasn't fitting the mold of what society told him to be. And I was telling my son when he got in the car when I picked him up that day, I said, the sad part about this is the conversation is going to go like this. Take away all the guns. Okay, that's not going to happen. We all know that. Okay, then let's talk about, this is the most gun-restricted state in the country, and now we're still having school shootings. That'll be talked about. And then they'll talk about whatever, mental health maybe will get brought up. But what they'll fail to talk about is parents' responsibility of raising good humans. And I was telling my son, I was like, the thing is, like, you have oddballs probably in your school right now, quote-unquote oddballs, air quotes, like where it's like they just think differently. They may just be different people. They may be thinking on a higher level than most of the people that they're around. And so for most people in school, it'd be like, oh, that person's an oddball. What about the parents? Like for me, like my job is to raise my sons to treat those people with respect and dignity. Treat those people well. Why is nobody talking about that? I know we have an anti-bullying campaign, but it's like, I feel like had you not had hockey, had you not been the guy that's like, hey, you want to fight? Okay, cool, we'll fight. If you weren't that kid, it could have gone way worse. You know what I mean? And that's where I feel like it's a conversation that should be had. The way that like we're treating people, the way that like we're, singling, people out. Like, oh, you're not part of our clique. You're not part of our crew because you think differently, you dress differently, you look differently, or whatever the case may be. And it sickens me, man. It makes me really like bummed out. And I was sharing this with somebody the other day. Like somebody they tasked me with scheduling our 20-year reunion at school. And I was like, okay, like I'll help out with that. And I looked at the Excel spreadsheet of our like class. There were so many names on there that I didn't even fucking know. Mm-hmm. And that bummed me out so bad. I was like, dude, like, how did I not know these people? There was only 400 and something like kids in our class. That's ridiculous that I didn't know every single one of them. I played football. I was a well-liked guy, captain of the football team, whatever. But I was so stuck in my own little world that I didn't even take the time to like maybe strike up a conversation with somebody. Be like, I don't know you. What's your story? And so I was like, obviously I'm looking at things from my vantage point now as an adult and mature adult and things I've learned and evolved into. But I wish that I could put that off now onto my kids and be like, make the time to go and speak to people. Take the time to go and learn from somebody else. You know what I mean? Don't get so closed off. You mentioned that you went out of high school and then you started a bunch of gyms. Did you feel like you were becoming part of the matrix, like by starting like a business, or was it more, it was what you're passionate about, so that's what you did?
That's a good question. I didn't go from high school to gyms. I did go to college, and I rejected everything there. I didn't buy any of the textbooks. I brought like 2 textbooks my entire college career, and then I would go home and pirate this other information off the internet. I didn't have money, so I was just like using those free download sites where Shazam and
totally
Napster, and everyone's downloading music, and I'm downloading like videos of seminars of people talking about like this deep inner work. and I'm listening to it, and that's what I was doing at 19 years old. But completely just going to college just to go through the routine because I didn't know what else to do. Anyways, by the time I finished college, I'm like 100% certain that I'm asking myself questions. Why am I living in a state where it's literally snowing like 8 months out of the year and everything outside is dead? And it's uncomfortable for me to go outside. The sun isn't shining. The clouds are out. And I was just like, all right, I'm out of here. And in 2 weeks, I moved to California, which was about 13 years ago.
That's awesome.
And I moved here because for the gym stuff. I wanted my own gym. And at the same time, you know, I'd been shouting what are considered conspiracy theories, which almost all of them are mislabeled as conspiracies. But I used to be like, you know, the government. In 2003, I did a classroom presentation about 9/11 being an inside job, and we were supposed to compare two opposing arguments to each other, and I just picked 9/11 because I knew that like some people were saying some other stuff, and then there's the media story. And I went in completely neutral, and I found literally like over 100 proofs that 9/11 didn't happen the way that the media portrayed it.
Right.
Like videos, documents, testimonies, like videos of like firemen talking like on the day that it happened, original recordings of radio shows explaining what happened, and then how the media said it happened. And I found one thing that the media like supported the media story, and it was basically just the media story itself.
Yeah.
And so this was actually my opening up, right? Like it was Santa Claus like 10 15 years before.
Right.
Then it was like this. And I presented it to the classroom, and every single person, including the instructor, like went into a frenzy, or including the professor, went in just yelling at me and crying, and my brother's in the military right now. How can you say this? You know, no one was really talking about this in 2003. So I was just kind of just like watching and experiencing this, like people breaking down and melting down because they're just addicted to their own ideologies. And they're failing to be able to be open to others. Yeah. So anyways, that was like the big thing. Anyway, so then I get big into like the government's against us and yada, yada, yada. By the time I moved to California, I'm like wanting to leave the country because my goal was to move to California where I perceptively saw it being the best. Like this is the best place to live in California for someone who's in the health industry. And I gave myself 2 years, and I was just like I was actually in a junkyard. This guy had a junkyard in his backyard, and I was buying a piece of exercise equipment from him. I was buying what's called a reverse hyper machine.
Yeah.
And this was like 2008. And we're talking about all this stuff, right? He's very knowledgeable because he's also just like an outcast of society. Like, and we're vibing together for like 2 hours. I tell him like, yo, I've been to Brazil. I went to China because I was thinking about doing the whole fitness thing in a different country because this country is like not up to my standards, right? And he said, and I'm like, I'm thinking about going to Dubai to check that place out to see where I'm going to go next. And he's like, yo, if everybody like you leaves, then like what's going to fix this? Like what are you leaving? You know, what's the cost of you leaving where you are right now and you can see all of this stuff? Yeah. Do you really just want to leave it? Dude, and that guy like changed my life. So I stayed in California, and then to answer your question, the walls, I forgot all of the government conspiracy type stuff, and I built a gym in downtown Los Angeles, and I just completely focused on who comes into the walls of my gym because that was my art, that was my passion. Like, how do I make these people healthy? Yeah. And there was still a little bit of resistance and still a little bit of immaturity of dealing with some of the topics like the poison of food and all the stuff that's happening on the outside of, if it was still kind of health related, I still looked and shamed stuff happening on the outside of the walls of my gym. But really, like, that transitioned me out of the looking at everything negatively and just focused on what I created and just focused on creating. And that brought me to the next phase, which is like, we make everything, not just within our life, but even the stuff that we're supposedly shaming, like, that's our creation also. Like, eventually you get to that connection gets made, and that's another phase that happens.
How did you start the gym itself? Did you have like an investor helping you, or was it something that you saved money and you were able to like do it all on your own? How did that start?
So I was working as a personal trainer, and I was paying a gym like on La Cienega like $15 a session. So by this time I don't have employee mindset because of all the other stuff that happened. So me being an employee, me working for somebody is absolutely out of, like, I've just never considered it. Yeah. So when I moved to California, I had a degree in exercise science. And so I started advertising on Craigslist. Craigslist used to be really popular back then. Everybody used Craigslist. And I moved to California and I didn't know what Craigslist was, found out. And I went to this gym. I was like, hey, can I train people here? I have a degree in exercise science and I know how to exercise. And they're like, well, you need a personal trainer degree, or you need a personal trainer certificate. And I was like, why? And so I was studying the personal trainer material to pass the test. And I was putting advertisements on Craigslist, like, I'll come stretch you out. And I didn't have any money at this time. So I went to the library and I took pictures of books of like people stretching other people out, like partner-based stretching. Yeah. And I was riding around LA, just stretching random people out. Like after they would work out or when they got up, it was just like partner-based stretching. And then I got my personal training cert, and then I started training in this gym, and like immediately just found that I was just in the corner with the squat rack. And then just using like the floor. Yeah. And so then I also at the same time met a guy who ended up being a really good friend, and he still is, who's like, hey, do you want to come work on your off hours and help me and my company and I sell apartments to USC kids? And I was like, sure. So I had an apartment with that company I was managing. I eventually managed like tons of apartment buildings and the entire maintenance staff, and I was selling apartment leases, making commission $100 to like $300 per apartment lease, and sometimes I could do that multiple times a day. Yeah. And I had an apartment, so I quickly moved out of the gym and just bought my own squat rack and started buying my own kettlebells. And here's the thing, is that as a personal trainer with my own pad, where I had this equipment, I was making like $100,000 a year, because if you have 10 clients paying you at the time $75 an hour, it equals about $2,000 a week, which is $100,000 a year salary. On top of that, I was also going to this other gig, and I was responsible for all these apartment buildings, the maintenance staff, kind of like leader in the office. And I was doing that it was like I had another job on top of making $100,000 a year. And I think as a personal trainer, most would just stop at the 100K and maybe figure out how to increase. I was just like also stacking on top of that. I don't know what my salary was, but it was a lot. I remember going to the bank and like depositing like 18 checks and like getting a bank receipt that was just like, it was just like almost like a good problem of having to just wait for the ATM to print out the receipt. And it was just like printing like, so I was like making money because I had another job. I was like straight up hustling, and I was doing that because I wanted my own gym. That's why I moved to California. It was just like I had this, like I said, I felt just like I felt when I wrote down that we were going to win nationals. I felt and had a vision of this gym, which I had in my mind was going to be called F cubed, like F with like the little number 3. Yep. And it stood for Functional Fitness Facility. that was going to be like, that's what I had in mind of my gym. So I was like working, making all this money, buying all the dollars I spent. I was buying more equipment, upgrading spaces. And within 1 or 2 years, I was in a penthouse in downtown Los Angeles, top floor. And in that space, I started having kickboxing classes. So I went from being a personal trainer to classes. And shortly after, and the classes, you get multiple people in there. It's a little bit easier mentally. And then right after that, I found out about CrossFit. And it was just like, this is the next step. I already had my own gym. And so I went into the CrossFit world. I immediately affiliated my gym with CrossFit. I never even joined a CrossFit gym.
Right.
And so this is like me in another environment where I'm the weirdo, because I never looked at what other CrossFit gyms were doing, and I was just always doing my own stuff. And yeah, I went through the whole CrossFit phase, which was like 10 years of me owning a gym and being a pretty well-known CrossFit competitor and a well-established gym owner, business owner in downtown Los Angeles. I had at one time two CrossFit gyms in downtown LA, CrossFit Mean Streets and CrossFit Smiley Streets. But they were much, in my mind, much more than just CrossFit communities, right? Because I was just like kind of pushing the boundaries. They were just experimental labs for me. I used to have people work out with blindfolds on, work out with different types of music, with the lights down, with no music. I was constantly, I had basically test groups every single day to figure out the human being even more for 10 years. And I coached a lot of classes. I wasn't just like, there was a couple years where I just like traveled all year long and had other people run the gym. But ultimately, most of those 10 years, I was coaching a lot and like interacting and basically experiencing fitness through 20 people a class, because I have all these individuals. Yeah. And I was teaching at a high level because I was learning through these 20 individuals with them.
Yep. Then when did you decide that you were done? What was the catalyst to being like, I need to get out of this?
So in 2011, so early into this, my hockey injuries started coming up because I also have a chiropractor injury from around 2009 or 8, where a chiropractor exploded a disc in my back, like in between C6 and C7, and that killed a nerve that goes down the left side of my arm into my thumb and index finger. So that nerve doesn't work. My left arm is way smaller than my right arm. My left shoulder is way smaller than my right shoulder. And so when you're doing a lot of reps at speed in a competition setting, my body just wants to get the barbell overhead, right? And so it starts compensating. So my right side starts pulling over my left side, and I have all these injuries in my neck and everything, which eventually went down into my hips, and my legs are all misaligned. Everything's kind of out of tune in my body. And I went and got an MRI once a long time ago. I have 3 tears in each of my shoulders. A couple of them happened when I was doing CrossFit, but it was because they were already torn from hockey. Because I was such a destroyer, I was using my body as an instrument of like war, essentially. My shoulder labrums, and I was like one of the smallest guys on the ice. Yeah. My shoulder labrums are destroyed. So I think that I came into CrossFit with 2 tears in each shoulder, and then I tore another on each shoulder in different spots. So my shoulders don't even function correctly. Those early years of CrossFit, I couldn't even like switch on a light switch.
It's crazy.
But then I would go to a competition like every week. Back in those old days, because I was winning them all, and it was really exciting, and it was like the reason why I was perceiving people were coming to my gyms, because CrossFit in the early days, we were trying to figure out what works, and the people that won the competitions, like obviously they're doing what works. Eventually It all stabilized and everyone started doing what works, but in the earlier days, like we were just making stuff up.
And I remember in 2009 was the first time I experienced CrossFit And I don't think it had exploded on the scene yet. I was out in Virginia Beach, and my buddy that I grew up with was a member of SEAL Team 6. And so he was showing me all these workouts that I'd never even heard of, you know, and he had all these names for them, you know, like the Yankee, the Judas, the Yankee 3, like all these things. And it was all around like kettlebells, you know, you need to get a 1.5 pood kettlebell. And like, and he was telling me all these like things I needed to do. So he would send me these workouts like on my email. I still have them. And this was in 2009. So he was doing like CrossFit type shit like then. And then right after that, shortly after I came back from Virginia Beach, I started seeing like 2010 and 11, where I was like, dude, it was blowing up. Like everyone was into CrossFit. But what are your thoughts on, like you were saying, like you worked through those injuries, like having tears in your shoulders and still working through it. A lot of the guys and girls that I know that have done CrossFit have injured themselves in the process. And do you think that's a part of poor body mechanics, or is it maybe like not listening to your body or being in tune with your body enough to like kind of know when to shut it down, you know? So
CrossFit, and so I'm going to answer that in two ways. Quickly, CrossFit is a sport and a health program. And usually if people are doing it as a sport, they get injured, it's because they had poor biomechanics, and then they're going into a competition like I was and doing things for the sake of points, for the sake of winning. Right. And at that, like, you go into a competition knowing that in order to do well, you're going to have to risk injury. And it's just basically those who are willing to risk the most injury are going to be the ones that exceed past their normal threshold of what they can do. And so there's a little bit of a risk involved in the sport of CrossFit. When you go into just a CrossFit class, there's less of that. However, CrossFit is very, very good at invoking these feelings of bliss and achievement. And that's why, as a fitness program, it's really successful, because it's like in the program to get people to feel really good about pushing themselves past their thresholds, and they can make massive amounts of change because of that. And when you start talking about like what is bliss, what is flow state, all of these things, like this gets addictive. Yep. And so it's almost like CrossFit is so successful in doing what it does, that especially back in the earlier days, there wasn't a knowledge that like, wow, people are knowingly injuring themselves because they're addicted to this flow state, this feeling of bliss, this light feeling after the workouts. They're addicted to that, and they're willing to just like ignore long-term injury and just continue going to the gym. Even if there's a little shoulder pain, they're going to just go every single day for the next 2 years until that develops into something worse. So is that the function of is it CrossFit's fault is like the big question, right? But that's where I started, like that's the realm I was working in, is the psychological components of getting healthy and even becoming a better competitor, because you have to have a vision that encompasses the entire human being. Yeah. And so, to answer your question, I think people get injured because we're sitting in office buildings, and then we walk into this CrossFit gym, and we immediately make like 30 to 50 friends. We start doing something that we all love. It pumps our body with endorphins and serotonin and all these feel-good hormones. And then we're just like, I'm doing this every day. I don't care what my wife says. I don't care. Like, people just start buying the clothes, and like you see it, like they're in. And I would say it's like that's a success, but it does need to be addressed, and I think it has been addressed, right? Like, so that's when like all of a sudden like mobility become 2008, 2009, there wasn't people didn't take mobility seriously.
No, not at all.
CrossFit is an organization, if you start looking at Greg Glassman's original intention with what CrossFit was it's all there. It's just like any religion, you know, his original intention is like pure and solid. Like you must be like, there's so much talking about like range of motion and technical ability and flexibility. And then it just kind of gets like just human error and human vision just kind of starts skewing the whole thing. Yeah. So yeah, like we can talk about that forever.
Right.
It's like,
when did you decide to get out of it and why?
So because I was injured, I stopped working out. Yeah. Because it was hurting. Yeah. But then competitions would pop up and like 20 of my members would want to do the competition. So then it's just like, well, I'm not just going to go there and be a spectator. Like I'm going to go there and see what happens, because I also own a gym and I want people to know. Yeah. And I would just first place. I had so many trophies, like so many trophies, first place competitions. And then also there's like the big competitions of open and regionals. I wouldn't ever expect to make it to regionals, because it was like kind of a very slim amount of people made it to the regionals. And I was just, every year I wouldn't be training, I wouldn't be working out, I would just be like focusing on my athletes. I was dating Andrea Ager at the time. So she was like really big into the, she has a different last name now, but she was really big, and she's like one of the more popular females. I was like completely focused on getting her to the games. I was coaching another gym owner, Wayne Willette. It's like one year I was just like not even working out at all. Yeah. And coaching just all these athletes. First open workout comes and I just do better than all of them. And then I just made it to regionals like 6 times, and regionals was like a thing that people would work out they would like commit their entire day to trying to get to. Yeah. And then the games was like another level. Never got to the games, mostly because I never wrapped my mind around it. Like I accepted that I wasn't a games athlete, but for whatever reason, it was just, I always made it to regionals, no matter how little I worked out. I would walk into CrossFit gyms with Andrea, and people would be like, hey, does your boyfriend do CrossFit? Like, because I just wasn't working out. Yeah. And like, and then she's like, yeah, he's been to regionals like 4 times. And they'd just be like, what? And it was like kind of unbelievable. And so this was happening. I had to like figure out why, right? Yeah. And I just, through a lot of research and already knowing a lot of this stuff, you mentioned this post. It was like the fact that I would go to the beach. The beach was my favorite place, because the gym stressed me out, because people were just walking up to me, like asking me to do stuff, asking me questions. So I go to the beach like almost every single day. It was like my happy place where I could just be. And so just in the sand, air, sunlight. And I started like realizing like, wow, throughout all of history, all the sages, all occult, secret society, wisdom. So the conspiracy theories they turn into, you eventually just start like, whoa, what do they know that we don't know? Right. And you start like, forget about the lies that they're telling. Like, what's the good stuff that they're doing, and how can I apply that to me? And you start seeing like, whoa, it's all about these 5 elements, right? Sun, air, earth, water, and ether, which can be translated in many ways. And like, I'm actually using this stuff to win competitions without even knowing it. And once that knowledge hit, the gym became really boring to me. It was just like, yo, I can somehow transcend all of this training and do well. And all of these people can do the same thing. So people would come up to me and say like, hey, I remember distinctly this guy coming up to me and asking like what he can do because he keeps on getting sick. And I was like, well, go outside. Like, when was the last time your feet was on the earth is the question I asked him, and he couldn't even tell me. I was like, go outside and like lay down, play, stand, throw a frisbee, play with your dog, whatever, but get outside and take your shoes off. This is like 2015 or 14, and he looked at me like I was speaking a different language, right? Yeah. Which I understood, but that was where my mind was. in that time. And so being inside in a gym was just like really boring to me. It was like very boring, very slow, but I was still so good at what I did. And eventually I created a situation where the gyms kind of dissolved very, very quickly. Yeah. I partnered up with some guys to move into a bigger, better space, and the situation went south very quickly, and 10 years of gym ownership just ended within a couple months. And then I was free. Like I was just like,
so you weren't unhappy about it? It wasn't like
I didn't have 1 ounce of anger I was already like tuned into the fact that I create everything.
Right.
And so I was like, as it was happening, like it completely was if we want to traditionally look at this, if we want to cast blame, it could have been easily perceived that like somebody else didn't hold up their end of the deal. That wasn't me, but like in actuality, I know that I even created that situation, you know? So we all are kind of meeting and intersecting in our own realities and fulfilling each other's creations exactly as we're intending them. So these two came into my life to fulfill my desire to not have to be inside of a gym.
That's a trip. How do you deal with like when it comes to like family members that you want to like help? And the reason I'm asking that, because there's been a portion of my life where I've had some of the same knowings that you did. You know, some of the same knowings of like for many, many, many years, I never even got sick. I just wouldn't get sick. Mm-hmm. I was always outdoors. I was always hiking. And I just believed, I had a knowing, like I just don't get sick. That doesn't happen to me. It wasn't until the last year that I had just a mountain of stress like happening and like this and that, where I could tell that my immune system was compromised. I was like, dude, I'm compromised big time. I'm not like optimal at the moment. You know what I mean? I'm not, my health as far as food was not where it needed to be. My exercise routine was off. I wasn't outdoorsy enough. I was indoors way too much, sitting down too much, and just a lot of stress from outside things, again, that I created. And I think it was a creation to kind of like level me up, to like kind of wake me up again and be like, no, there needs to be a rebirth here, like a transcendence, because all this shit is happening for a reason. But one of the hardest things that I've had in my life was having that knowing of how someone can heal themselves, having a very hard time explaining that, because it's a knowing for me, but it's hard to, like, you tell them like, dude, go outside with your bare feet and touch the earth. To me, it's like, I feel that I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what you need to do. But you say it to another person, they're like, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. So I would see my family members like suffering, and they would like come to me and ask me questions. I'm like, well, if you just did this, like, that would fix it. And they're like, yeah, whatever. And they're not going to do anything of what you tell them. Like, not even close, not even remotely close. So how did you deal with, I guess, or did you deal with like
that's called an ask hole.
I love that, dude.
Where they ask you questions constantly and never ever implement what you say.
Did you deal with that with your family, like trying to help them, or like know that like they could change like maybe their situation in life if they would just maybe make some minor adjustments, and then did you just have to surrender to them, like they're their own people and they're
man, and this is making me realize that it's interesting being old, because when you get a question or you start thinking about your life, you can see the phases of and it's like, wow, it's like I've been so many different people up until this point. Mm-hmm. But so in my understanding or understanding and knowledge now at teaching, I've taught so much in my life. Is to be very, and basically at the end of the gym thing, I was getting really bored, because I was realizing that like the best teachers don't teach. Like, they don't try and impart their knowledge onto the students, like implant their knowledge onto the students, because the students have to have the experience themselves. So it's really just about like facilitating environments where the learning happens through their body system. Some people do learn by talking, but for the most part, those people are showing up and listening to you. The people that aren't, like, you can talk to them all you want and they're not going to get it. Yeah. So also, my understanding of how I also have a realization that my understanding of of what is optimal is not the case for everybody, including the person that comes up and asks me a question. So I have to be very clear of the reality that they're creating. Yeah. Because if they're addicted to feeling bad and to being sick and to wanting, like if the life that they designed is that they want to watch TV every single day and they're plugged into that matrix and that's what fulfills them, then me telling them to go outside, like, it actually doesn't match what the question they're asking me. Like, they think they're asking me, like, what's going to make me healthier? But really what they want is just, like, how do I make my creation better? And so understanding people as they are and letting go of whatever you think is ideal. Everyone, again, it's back to normal. Just because you think it's normal to be healthy doesn't mean that everyone needs to be healthy.
Yeah.
And I'm coming, like, as a gym owner, someone completely concerned with health. I don't try and impart health on everybody. And I learned this because in 5th grade, I convinced my entire family, all the kids at least, to not buy Christmas presents for each other anymore. And because this is pointless, guys. Yeah. Like, what are we doing? This is completely pointless.
Put ourselves into debt so we can give each other gifts.
Right.
That we won't even remember.
Like, I have like $6 to my name and I'm supposed to spend it on you guys, and you guys are going to like spend a little, even less money on me. Like, come on.
That's awesome.
Like, it's a lose-lose for all of us.
Right.
So I convinced there's 4 of us to not buy Christmas presents for each other. Right. So I've never like bought a Christmas present for my siblings, like, since that moment. Yeah. And then also when I was like, when I first moved to California, so like 13 years ago, I became vegan and raw vegan. And I went through that. And I've been vegan for 3 years in my life total. It was 1 year back then and 2 years just recently. And these last 2 years, I never mentioned it. Right. But back then I was like trying to tell everybody that they need to quit eating animals and eat that whole jazz. You realize that sometimes what you're saying, if you believe in it so much, you get blinded that there's more important things that maybe the people you're talking to realize that you don't. And so, like, us buying Christmas gifts together, like, dude, because it's what I believed, and I didn't have the brain power to understand this back then, but looking at that, it just like, how much joy did I stop, right? How much joy did I take away from our family? How much connection between siblings did I disrupt by coming up with this idea that I thought was right and correct just because I knew it was all fake and bullshit. Yeah. And I basically then brainwashed everybody based on my beliefs. Yeah. So I really, to answer your question, I really am careful at trying to make everybody else the ideal that I want, because it doesn't matter. Everyone, like that, the meeting of realities that I mentioned before, everybody's on their own journey. And unless they're like very specifically asking me about something, then I answer, but I never convince. I never try and convince people. And even on my Instagram, you'll see that like I'm saying a lot of stuff. I for the most part, if I'm saying things that look negative, I'm never saying like, I'm not really saying that they are. I'm just talking. Yeah. I'm talking like, this is happening because this is happening, and this was made up by these people to get this response. But there's not like an emotional like, this is bad, this shouldn't be. Yeah.
Now it's a powerful message, because I think you mentioned it early, talking about what you would call fat people, right? So growing up, I don't remember this as a child. My dad was gone by the time I was, I think, 1 year old. But my mom shared with me that he had like a disdain for like fat people. He hated fat people. Like, couldn't stand to be around them. Just wasn't into it. And as I was growing up, my brother, older brother, was like, he never worked out or didn't need to work out. He just had a really nice body, like, 6-pack abs, and just like, he just had that metabolism and that kind of structure where he didn't really need to put that much effort in. And then for me, I was always like the chubbier kid of the two. You know, I was like chubbier. I had to work harder to like lose weight, whatever. He's like, hey, what's up, fat boy? And like, it was always like a joke. And then, so I got to a point in my life where I was working construction and doing junior lifeguarding, and I was like barely eating. I was like, dude, I don't even want to eat. I don't want to be fat anymore. So like, I like lost all this weight. I mean, unhealthily. I mean, I looked at the first time I noticed what I looked like, someone was videotaping me with one of those like old school camcorders. And I looked at my fingers and I was like, oh shit, like I have lost so much weight. And I look like unhealthy. This is bad. But after that moment, I kind of started to adopt some of the same ideology about like people that were overweight. And it bled into even into my adult life, where like I had these judgments of people who were overweight, like where it's like, I've been overweight and I know what it takes to not be overweight. It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of effort, and a lot of this and a lot of that. And it was damaging a lot of my relationships because I had all these judgments. And it was funny. I mentioned something to my wife, and this is going to sound like a total asshole comment because it was, but I saw some like overweight person, and they were like laughing and they were all happy and like, you know, doing this thing. And I looked over at my wife. I was like, look at them. They're all happy and like having a good old time. And like, they're like overweight and they're like super happy. She's like, oh, imagine that. A fucking fat person can actually be happy and joyful, you know? And like, it hit me like a ton. Like, I was like, what a dickhead. You know what I mean? Like, what an asshole. Like, I have like totally like, what could I have learned from that person? You know what I mean? Instead of like judging the outward appearance, and that's been like part of my involvement. And like part of it was like, whenever I learned something new, I always want to share it with other people. And almost like you said, like I was trying to convince them that my way of thinking was accurate. My way of living was accurate. And theirs was totally fucked up. And now it's more like I feel like I've kind of like taken a step back and being like, you know, what's true for me is my truth. What's true for you is your truth. I do still struggle with choices that people make that are, you just know they're unhealthy. Like where it's like, you're having all these health issues, but you're smoking packs of cigarettes a day. Like it just seems like just a terrible choice for you. Like, and I love you and I care about you, so I want to try and help you if I can. But like at a certain point, you just need to surrender, I guess, and just be like, you know what? Like that's your karma, your life. Like you're gonna do wherever it is you feel you need to do. But I found myself almost being like, and I still do it to an extent, of just like disassociating, like being like, okay, I can't stand to watch you like being like that, so I'm just gonna kind of like remove myself from the situation because it's too painful to like watch it, knowing that like all the science is there. It's not like my knowledge that I'm imparting on you, like it's out there. People know that this isn't a good choice, and I'm trying to frame it to where it's like, but who says it's not a good choice? Who's like to where I can get to like a place where I can just love and not care about what other people's choices are. Can you like talk on that at all?
Yeah. So when you look out into your reality, and this comes with the knowing and realization that you are everything, right? And if you want to bring science into it, then we're talking about just energy, right? The energy that's shaped, and particle science, which is like the atom and the electron spinning around it, like that's kind of been picked apart, and now it's more about like more of like an electrical universe that's connected, and what we're perceiving as differences is really just different wavelengths, which are three-dimensional. So it's more like shapes of this energy, and everything's made up of the same thing, made in distorted or fractalized into different shapes of the same stuff. So when you look into your reality, and this ties into a whole bunch of other philosophies, right? I think it's important when you're looking at reality to be able to look at it from one lens and be able to take that lens off and look at it from another lens, even though those two lenses might be contradicting, right? So this is just one lens of looking at everything. So from that lens, then we're all connected. What you're really looking at is just more of you, right? And then if you understand that your emotion, so emotion, energy in motion, your emotional state is so powerful that it changes your entire perception of reality, and there's no difference of perception and reality. And eventually you can subscribe to like, it's actually changing the physical reality around you. Like the the state that you were in, you are traveling. So I mentioned time not being linear, and that you can connect to certain potential future realities, right? Because there really is no such thing as a future. It's just a reality that's existing now, and you choose to travel to that reality. When you start putting all this together, what's most important is your state of being, your emotional state, and you looking out into your reality and shaming something that is obviously existing within the frame of reference that you reside in, right? Is like, that's what needs to be looked at. That's what needs to be more harmonized, is your reaction to what's happening around you. And if you want to improve and you want to travel to another reality where everything's more harmonious, then you must be more harmonious now. And that includes looking at the things that you don't like looking at and somehow finding harmony, somehow finding truth, because everything that's happening is legit. It's happening, period. Right. And I would say the only thing that's closest to a falsity is for somebody to say or to think that that shouldn't be. For you to look at something and perceive something and say that shouldn't be is the closest thing to anything being false that I can think about, because it is. Yeah. And we know that the closest thing to truth is that it is. Like, I am, we are. Like, that's actually, like, that's what truth is in this present moment. It's like the things that are here, period. So whether you're looking at a plastic bottle that's going to go into a landfill, saying that that's going to happen and trying to, like, talk about all the negative things about it, or talk about, like, why eating animals is bad, and talking about why you shouldn't be smoking cigarettes, all of those things are just closer to unharmonious than harmonious. And when we talk about energy shaping itself into geometric figures, if you think about music, like, all of those notes on a keyboard, they're all the most harmonious vibrations. If you put a note that's in between two of the notes, it's going to sound bad, right? And so the thing about the piano is every key you strike is tuned to a harmonious vibration. But if you pick up a guitar and you're not good at playing it, you know that, like, if you're unable to get those tones correctly and you get the tones in between, it sounds horrible. It actually makes you not feel good. And so when we're talking about energetic shapes and we're talking about aligning those shapes and becoming in harmony, we're talking about the difference between, like, a tone that's played correctly and a tone that's played a little bit off. And when you're and that's all controlled by your emotional state. That all being said, also, I'm not inferring that positive-based emotions are the only thing to cause harmony, because you could be very, very, for lack of better words, negatively based and be in harmony, right, like Hitler. And I'm not saying positive is good and negative is bad in this case, because that's just an illusion. Right. But we can look at somebody like Hitler and we can see that his intentions were in complete harmony. He wanted to eradicate the weaknesses in the human population and create a super race. And he was, like, completely clear, completely harmonious, completely aligned to his purpose. And because of that, everything around him shifted towards that. Yep. And we all think he lost the war, which I don't subscribe to that. He was, like, very successful. And I would say, if you want to extend this out into extraterrestrials, like, that's who they contacted. They contacted the person who was most harmonious with his intentions, which happened to be service to himself. And he did have intentions to eradicate others, but he was clear. And so you want to be the type of person that knows what they know, and everything is, like, on that straight path to your truth, and realize that other people's truth, other people's behaviors are going to be different, and don't let that sway you.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, like, as a coach, like, I watch, like, some of the things that you've done. I see some of the things that Troy's doing and stuff like that. And it almost feels like, for me, you almost have to get to that place where it's like, you know, your truth and you kind of stay there. You can, like, try and show people the way, but you can't drag them there. You know what I mean? They're going to have to, like, figure out on their own. It's their own reality and their own truth. Because I can see how that would be kind of like they say ignorance is bliss. It's like the more you know, like it can be kind of like, fuck, dude, like I know too much, dude, and like this is not like it can make you crazy, you know, because you're like, I want to help people, I want to like leave the world a better place. But maybe that's what it is knowing what my goals are, knowing what my vision is, and just sticking to that vision, and things will come into my awareness as I go. But like, just accept it for what it is. I don't need to try and change it, you know. And I think that's where I fell into a lot of traps, is trying to change things, trying to change the reality, you know, like, yeah,
even within your own life, right?
Right.
And restructuring, like I was just talking about looking at things that aren't you. Well, even when you look at your own life, and you're like, I wish I wasn't driving this car and I had this other car. I wish I didn't live here. A lot of my work has to do with just talking to people, and the first step is to bring realization to people that they have created their present environment. Like they're actually living in the heaven scenario that they once thought up. Yep. Right? But when people get to this reality, then they kind of like get disillusioned, or they see something on TV. This guy owns an island and he uses his private jet to travel there. Like, and you start like, why isn't that me? Why?
Comparison,
right?
Man, the thief of joy.
Right. And so exactly. So there's an equation: happiness equals reality minus expectation, or attachment, or whatever. So you can be completely happy with your reality if you're just in the present reality, in the present moment. But the second that you're like looking around, you're like, I want this to be different, and not understand how to make it different, you just kind of victimize yourself. That's where things kind of go south, because then that's the disharmony I was speaking of, which is going to make your human instrument unharmonious and less able to steer yourself into the direction that you want to go, because you're harmonizing with, like, everything's erratic, right? And you become in harmony with that erratic vibration, and you're going to go to erratic realities where you just feel like you're getting more and more spun out of control and don't have control.
So with all that like being said, what would you say to someone that's like trying to change their reality? So I'll use myself as an example. Mm-hmm. So for years and years and years, I spent in corporate America, like doing the thing, working, being part of the matrix, making the money. And I had a knowing while I was there, like, this is not where I want to be. I don't want to be here. I'm not interested. This is soulless. Like, I feel like a cog in a wheel. I feel like if I was gone, like, they'll just replace me tomorrow. There's no loyalty here. There's no like sense of like connectedness in a way. And it felt very like disingenuous and inauthentic. And it wasn't my vibe at all. So while I was in it, I was always trying to get out. You know, like, I need to get out of this. Like, this is not like me. I don't feel good in here. Like, it's just not good. So I ended up creating my own reality. I had a 6 back surgery. And so that was like my way of getting out, because it's like, now I have to get out. You know what I mean? I'm having this back surgery, and I've explained to people, and I feel like you will know what I'm talking about when I say that I tell people, like, I've had 6 back surgeries and I had some issues with my back, but I created the majority of them. And people are like, what? Like, you created? I was like, well, some of it may have been congenital, may have been born with some things. But I felt like, in a way, I was almost bringing it into my reality. I was bringing it into my awareness. Part of it was a wanting to, like, check out from reality. Like, I'm going to be in the hospital on all kinds of drugs. I don't even have to think anymore. I can just disappear from society for a while. And I was creating a lot of it. And I created the surgeries. I created, like, the outcome of them. But anyway, I left corporate America. And then I got into this podcasting game. I was like, I'm going to get into podcasting. But I'm going to do it the way that I want to do it, which is in person, so I don't lose the ability to connect with another human. I felt like if I was doing it over the phone or through Zoom, I was going to miss that opportunity. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it, and I'm going to fly to all of my guests. I'm going to just fly there. I'll get a hotel, I'll get a car, whatever. And I knew it was going to be a big financial investment to do it that way, but I was going to do it, and that's that. But I put myself like in a big financial hole as a result, because I wasn't capitalizing financially on the podcast itself. And so it's like, dude, what do I do now? Like how do I get out of the hole and then create like something that's profitable, that makes sense? So I think and the reason I'm using myself as an example, because I know there's a lot of people that can relate to that, where like they're in a hole and they're trying to get out of it. So how would you tell somebody, okay, this is where you are, you're at point A. Yes, you've created this. You created the reality that you're in, but how do you shift that reality and go in a direction to where it's like you can climb out of where you are? Right.
So there's a lot of actionable things that we can do to surf into different realities.
Right.
Just like there's actionable things that we can do to change our body, or to become smarter. The same thing happens with choosing realities. Like there's exercises that you can do and you can become better at them. So realizing that you created everything and accepting it, that's number one, is to not look into your reality and be disappointed. And when you look into occult knowledge or initiation rites, or even rites of passages from tribal communities, you see that they're doing exercises. They're building skills of being able to control their emotions and doing all of this stuff, and they're doing it for a reason, so that they attain what we would consider superpowers.
Yeah.
So you asked a broad question, and I'm going to answer. So first of all, a lot of people, when they look at their life, and if they're feeling disappointment or feeling anxiety, it's because they don't have connection to why they're there, right? You could have easily went through those 6 back surgeries. I could have easily went through my business closing down and felt anxious, but having the knowledge and the acceptance, it's the acceptance, right? So I've been in conversations with like professional athletes turned like paralyzed, and I need to sit there and tell them to their face and ask them like, why did you want this to happen, right? Like somebody who had everything and then like nothing perceivably, and then you like, it's very simple to see, like you see that the way that they're talking is like, well, I was winning and I was able to win everything, and it's just like I had these questions like, why, like, is there any more than this? Like they're chasing girls, they're chasing drugs, they're doing all of these things because they're just like, they're almost done with this life.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're done with that previous life, and then this accident happened, and now you get a new one, right? Which is exactly what you wanted.
Yeah.
You like it, and it comes in this flavor. But okay, so actionable things. So a way to step into a different reality is you have to harmonize yourself to it. Okay, and if you have issues or you want to choose out of this current reality, then we just have to rewrite the code, and that can happen easily before you go to bed. Okay, because when you go into the sleep world, you're out of this reality,
right?
Kind of like in some other reality, which is very powerful. That's the reality that's actually like fueling this reality, and so you don't want to go into that dream world with your anxieties of this reality, because that fuel is going to come back into you all night long, and you're going to wake up into the same reality. So if you want to start waking up into more optimal realities, then you want to rewrite the code before you go to sleep. And the way that you one way you can do that is when you're laying down in bed, think about your day and start first. This is actually number one, is you need to know what you want. Okay, so that's actually 99% of people don't know the answer to that question. So that's a big question, but that's a separate thing. But know what you want, and then based on that, everything that happened today, if it wasn't ideal towards the direction of what you want, then start rewriting it. Our visualization is very important, especially when the construct that this physical reality is real starts breaking down. Like we start realizing that like, we think things are solid and stable, but they're really not. And we realize that they can all be changed. our visualization becomes very important in this scenario. So everything that happened today, you just rewrite. You got an email that you didn't like. Well, what should it have said? What would you have wanted it to say? You had an interaction with someone and like you don't like someone talking down to you. How would you want them to talk to you? And as you're falling asleep, you're idealizing everything in your existence, right? And you start to, it's just like whether you believe in the magic or not, just recognizing what's happening and what you want to happen, just the distance, the separateness of that. This exercise will help just realizing what you want compared to what is. And a lot of people don't really do that. They just look at what is and they hate it and they just focus, and it's really just securing that into existence, right? Just I don't like this, I don't like this bullshit, blah, blah. Like you're just securing that into solid state form. We want to start like releasing that state and making a new. And so you have to know what that new is. And so as you're going to sleep, you're just rewriting the entire day's events to the most idealized, optimized heaven scenario that you can imagine. And then you're going to go to sleep. Sleep is something that I think is highly misunderstood. You're going to go to sleep, and basically what happens in sleep is your pineal gland opens up and releases melatonin. And that melatonin is like associated with dreaming, and melatonin goes to your body and it recalibrates everything and makes you healthier. And that's happening because your pineal gland is channeling in the codes from the cosmos while you're sleeping. And that's what dreaming is. You're interpreting these energetic codes that are coming into your body, and you're just interpreting it with our physical brain, even though the dreams that we're perceiving really have like nothing to do with the interpretations. The interpretations are interpreting things that we don't understand, we can't comprehend. So these physical codes are going in through the pineal gland and recalibrating the body. That's what sleeping and dreaming is. That's why we need it. We need this recalibration every single night. Well, because you just rewrote the day's events, as this is happening, you're going into that state with this idealized vibration of your existence, and all of that stuff is going to start to structure and harmonize your body with these new intentions and these new codes. That way, when you wake up in the morning, you, number one, have a better understanding and realization of what you want the day to look like, and you're going to start like manipulating things so that like you do get the conversation that you just like made up the day before, because now you know what it is. You start making your day, you're adjusting your day based on these idealized things. That's what's happening on like a non-woo-woo side of things. But from a woo-woo side of things, your physical existence is actually rearranging itself to you because you have punched in different codes into the matrix, and the matrix is going to start recalibrating around your vibrational state.
Right.
Do you have any questions on that?
No.
Super simple.
Like for me, it sounds like it's like, yeah, duh. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I got it. You know, I think it's very easy to get stuck in that negative state. And I'm saying this to the people who are listening, like, I understand it, and I empathize with people who are in like a spot that they probably don't want to be in. It's not their reality, but I also know that like energy flows where attention goes, you know? So if you're kind of like your attention is just stuck on how bad it sucks, it makes sense that it's probably just going to keep sucking. You know what I mean? Like, because that's where the energy is going to. And for me, like me asking that question is number one, because I want to know for myself, like maybe just some more validation, but also because I know there's people who are going to listen to this that are probably in a spot they don't want to be in, and how can they shift that? How can they get out of that? And that's great work, because I think for me, a lot of people talk about the law of attraction, like you're attracting things into your life, but what they're not talking about is a law of resonance, where it's like you need to feel what that is going to feel like to be in that reality that you want. You know, you need to feel like, what is it going to feel like to be debt free? What is it going to feel like to have the freedom of like having money and being able to help people, and having the money to like go and travel the world and see new things and learn new things and evolve as a human? Like, what is that going to feel like to you? Not just like imagining it, visualizing it. Like, what does it feel like? And I think that's part of the missing piece, you know, for a lot of people, is the law of resonance. They're not really going into that.
Yeah, there's a gap there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the gap exists because people, upon hearing the law of attraction, and even just how we're kind of programmed to think that, like, I'm not a winner until I get the medal, like from a sports analogy.
Yep.
Well, no, you were a winner before. Like, you got the medal because you're a winner. It's not, you don't become a winner because you won the game or you won the competition. You were a winner because of all of the things that you were doing because you're a winner. And then the medal is just validation. It's just the side effect. And so a lot of people, when they're looking out into reality, they're thinking that when I get that job that I want, then I'm going to be happy and free and abundant and joyous and creative.
Right.
And it's very clear to see, like, no. It's reverse. You get the job because you're those things. The person who gets that job is going to be the happy, joyous, free, creative, no stress. That's the person who gets that job. When you get that job, it's just like
byproduct.
Right. It's a byproduct of the resonance that you're exuding. And we can do that now, no matter what experience we're in, right? Because this present moment is a launch pad to go wherever we want to go. Anyone that we look at, any single person that we look at, like, they started somewhere else, and that somewhere else is where you are now, and we can go wherever we want. And it's as simple as resonating the feeling, just being that version of ourself.
Right.
And a good you can do a writing exercise, just like building that character.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. Like, you don't even need to look at, so I was explaining, like, changing the past, because also the future exists in multiple potential realities. So does our past. And when we realize that all that is this present moment, and we can start to deconstruct the story that we make about our past, it's really easy to think that the past is real. But in actuality, it's not. The past is no longer, like, it doesn't exist here. Here is here. This present moment is here. And if we really want to get to a different future, the easiest, fastest way is to let go of your attachment to the past. Because if you imagine your trajectory coming from that past is leading you to this moment, if we change that trajectory, if we changed where you were in the past and re-idealized at least your emotional state and connection to it, then
trajectory.
Right. And we see this in the Mandela effect. Like, as a community, we've actually changed our past. Do you know about the Mandela effect?
No, explain that.
So everyone should Google Mandela effect. There's a bunch of people that swear Nelson Mandela died in prison, and then come to find out he didn't. He wasn't dead. He's the president of
South Africa.
Yeah. So that's where it started. But if you look up Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, right? The most famous movie line in all of existence is Darth Vader cuts off Luke's hand, and then they say some stuff to each other, and then Darth Vader says something to Luke, and he says, see if you can fill in the blank. Blank, I am your father.
Luke, I am your father.
Right. Luke, I am your father. Did you know that in this reality's past, that line got written differently and it got played out differently? So if anybody right now on planet Earth goes and looks at that movie, it doesn't say, Luke, I am your father, because we have changed the past. And the only way that we can know that is in recordings. Right. Because in this past of this reality, there was a recording of that movie. And in that movie, the line is, no, I am your father. So that movie's different in this reality. So we have chosen or reharmonized to a different past than what we remember. There's all sorts of example of this. Oscar Mayer Wiener. You know, there's a song on it. There's a freaking bus. Well, it's now spelled Mayer, Mayer. So it's now pronounced Oscar Mayer Wiener. We're talking about, like, an entire family's name is different. I remember Meyer.
Yeah, so do I.
Well, it's Mayer now in this reality. Mirror, mirror on the wall.
Yep.
Doesn't exist. Magic mirror on the wall. Our past has changed.
Right.
So we can use this. So I used to teach people how to be athletes, and then I taught people how to be the most optimal humans, and now I feel like I'm teaching people how to be what we know of as gods. Because if we have the ability to change the past, which is proven in these recordings, then we all can start changing our pasts in our life, and we can all start harmonizing to potential futures. But each of those happens now. So the past and the future really don't matter. All that matters is this present, everlasting moment of now.
So what's the best way to do it? Because I think there's a lot of people, and you hear it a lot now, especially, vulnerability, trauma, are all things that are, I'm not going to say buzzwords, but they're words that are being tossed around a lot now, like whether it be on social media or just in life. How would you tell somebody that has experienced a lot of trauma in their past to either make sense of it or to change that past to like kind of change their trajectory?
Yeah. The thing about trauma is I recognize it's real, but we all have trauma.
Totally.
All of us do. And I mean, I've talked to people. This is what I talk to people. And when you realize that your traumas might be horrible to you, but there's other people that have the same trauma and like in quotes, way worse.
Right.
You realize that you're really just addicted to them. You're addicted to those traumas, and not only that, you're addicted to the way that they make you feel, and you start replaying that in all of your situations. And I forget the name of what that's called, but there's actually, like, you actually get an emotional hit. And they figured this out when they started playing to like psychologically disturbed war vets. They started playing war movies, and they started seeing the dopamine hits that these guys were getting from watching like the trauma of the war that they experienced.
So it's not the trauma you're saying, it's the attachment to it.
They're addicted chemically. Like dopamine, if you're getting addicted to thinking about what happened, like you're actually getting chemical feelings of joy by thinking about something so imagine you get a dopamine hit when you think about this quote bad thing.
Yep.
Even though it's bad and you think that you want to not think about it anymore, you think you want to release attachment to it, you're still addicted to it, and you get this dopamine hit. And so you bring it up in conversations, you want everyone to feel bad for you, and you want to play this whole freaking thing. Yeah. Well, like, grow up. Like, that's the answer, is realize your addiction to it and quit feeling sorry for yourself, because remember what I said, that's false. Saying that something happened, shouldn't have happened, like
it happened.
Yeah, period. Right. And most likely you caused it and you chose it. And if you want to think like reincarnation, like if we want to expand out to multiple lifetimes, then definitely we need the experiences that we have in our life, and we came here for those experiences.
Yeah, and that's kind of it's definitely an esoteric, like, kind of like topic. I mean, I'm on board with it. I understand what you're saying. But for the listeners that are listening to this that are kind of like, dude, what the hell did he just say? That I created that trauma, that I brought that into my awareness. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Well,
like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for people to realize when they're addicted to this trauma and feel, because when you, I guess, what do I mean by reincarnation? Yeah, I mean,
I think everything's a soul agreement. This is I'll talk about like my belief on it. Like, I think everything's a soul agreement, right? And this is something that my wife and I have been talking about a lot lately. So there's people in my past that, as I perceive my past to be, that were not what I would say were not good for my reality, right? Like, it's like, dude, but I know that I had a soul agreement with that person. Like, I came down into this carnation, this like physical being came down here and had a soul agreement with that other person, and we had to have those interactions. In some way, shape, or form, those interactions, they happened. And I can say that they were bad and they were not something that I wanted, but I learned from them as a result, or I evolved past them as a result. Had I not had that experience, I wouldn't be where I am today in this present moment. So I think it's hard for people to, and that like spun my mind for a second when you said there's an addiction to that trauma. I was like, oh, wow. Fuck yeah, dude, I think there is. And do you know who Abraham Hicks is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went to one of her seminars here in LA, and she said something similar to that, where we're updating the programming. It's like when you get a computer and it's like an old school computer or whatever, and then they keep giving you new software that's coming out or whatever to update it and update it. Well, if you don't update it and you just leave your computer the old school computer it was, eventually the computer's not going to work because it won't be compatible with the new stuff that's out there, right? Mm-hmm. And she said that's the same thing with like our lives. If we continue to talk about our trauma, we continue to like bring it up in conversation, we continue to like put it back into our awareness now, we're just re-updating our programming every single time. And we're never going to evolve past that trauma. And I was like, wow. And so I thought about it then, and then when you just said that, I was like, oh shit, dude, that's so true. Yeah. So true. I think our backstories are important because I think it paints a picture of who we are today in this present moment. Like hearing your story of like, okay, I was like a kid and I was like, I knew that I was different, or I was the quote unquote oddball or whatever because I thought differently. And like the whole thing with Christmas and getting the family to not like buy gifts for each other because you saw the insanity in that. Like, why would I put myself in debt for that? But what joy did you steal as a result? But had none of those things happened, I wouldn't be sitting here with Raw right now. We wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So I think backstories are important. I think what's maybe where we go like off the rails is like our attachment to them so much. You know what I mean? Like it's who we are and we want to hold on to it, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, and the attachment usually comes because you feel helpless. You feel like it was a scenario where you're victimized. Yeah. Now here's a real brain fuck is that if somebody is doing something to you negatively or what you perceive as negatively, it doesn't mean that they're a negative person. They showed up into your reality exactly as you intended it to be. And we all are living a big song, right? That's what universe means, one song. Yeah. And there's going to be highs and lows. So we almost need, can you imagine if every single day was positive? That wouldn't like we would create negative scenarios. And so we are doing that. And if you create a negative scenario and you used somebody else to do that, it doesn't mean that they did anything wrong, even if they raped you. Like that's all story. And you see this in religious, all religions, the devil figure ends up being embraced. Like the end game is like they were either once part of the heaven scenario or they become embraced by the God or the deity figure. And evil really just is something that we don't understand. And
so you think like with people like, for example, like a lot of people that listen to this podcast are military folks, you know what I mean? Because I've had a lot of veterans on the show. And the shit that they've had to see and endure like overseas, you know, the evil that they experienced. Would you say that is like, it's not good or it's bad? It just is. I mean, cause like for me, like, and I've struggled with this and I've talked about it with this men's group that I go to, the other night, that sometimes I have a hard time sleeping peacefully at night because I feel like if I do, I'm completely naive to the realities of the world. And that comes from my programming as like being in the military and some of the experiences that I had as a child, you know, homes being broken into and things like that. And I experienced it. It definitely did happen. It is what it is. But now in this reality, like I feel like a sense of me doesn't want to let go of like what could be, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, like I want to be peaceful. I want everything to be cool. But at the same time, like I don't want to have my guard completely down to where like I can allow like evil to come into my home, because evil does exist and we can't really explain it. I don't know why that is, but in a way I almost feel it's like a mind fuck for me, because it's like, am I creating that reality? Like something bad will happen to me. Like, and so I feel this need to keep like my guard up. Okay, well, I'm gonna put my guard down and just be totally cool. But then what if something does happen? I don't know. So it's kind of like a weird dance that I'm trying to figure out. And I think there's a lot of guys that come out of the military, that come out of like childhood trauma or whatever it may be, and they are kind of stuck in the same like pattern, you know?
Mm-hmm. The same loop. Well, right. All of this is paradoxes, right? Like we can say evil doesn't exist, and we can say that it does exist, and things are right and wrong, and things aren't right and wrong, and everything's perfect. But like the military is a really good example of that, right? Like you, and I don't know anything about the military, so I'm sure I'm going to overgeneralize, maybe disrespectfully, on some of these concepts. Yep. So forgive me for doing that. But you got a soldier that's convinced that there's an enemy. Right? So from his perspective, the guy shooting a gun at him is bad. Right. But like, what about from the other guy's perspective? Like, who is actually bad in this scenario? So that right there kind of like is a mind fuck, right? Because when you both realize that you're just a kid,
you're fighting for your own cause, you know?
Right? Yeah. Okay, and then it's like, what's the cause, right? And so then you're like, okay, well, he's part of the bad cause. Well, both causes are also doing what they think is right. It might be a fight for land. It might be a fight because someone said something to somebody else, or it might be a fight for oil or power or whatever. But the causes also match each other like perfectly, where it just depends on the perspective state. Then when you realize that like maybe that's all made up, right? Like there's like an actual overall cause that keeps us distracted from what actually like matters, which is our true God powers, and we're disillusioned by thinking that countries exist. Like, dude, these countries, like that's an illusion. There's no line that separates the countries. Like, we are all slaves to our governments. And so then you can start looking not from soldier to opposite soldier, but like from soldier to like, wait, why am I being forced to do all this by this country who actually has both sides have the same boss. Right. They both have the same boss. And you're talking about banks, or you can even go into extraterrestrial organizations that own this entire slave planet. And then you're like, oh, I'm just a character in this game. And you can choose to be, to perceive an opposing character in this game as an enemy, or you can choose to view yourself as a victim, or you can choose to view yourself as an enemy. But in actuality, we just all are. And every philosopher comes to that. Like, what is. Like, it doesn't matter how we think about it, because it can be thought about on many different levels, many different ways, which all contradict each other. And when you're trying to find stability in yourself, it goes back to harmony, right? Like, you've done the things that you've done in your past. Things have been done to you in your past. And if you go to bed with putting all these protective measures around you, that's just how you are, you know? Right. And if it makes you feel good, then it makes you feel good. And you could look at other people that go to bed without a care in the world, and that's how they are. And then we all get to experience life based on those subscriptions. Like, we're subscribing to all of these stories, and some we have control of now, and some it might take us 30 years to be able to rewrite the story. But the thing is that, like, we're all kind of doing the same thing. All of us are kind of stumbling around, not really understanding the purpose of our existence. And just come back to your center self of like, I am here, and maintain integrity with that. And like, that's it. If you want to view people as enemies, you want to view your boss as an enemy, or the government as an enemy, that's fine. Like, that's the game you want to play. And we grow up and we start playing different games. Yeah. And it's all just as it is.
I feel like the need, or for me, knowing that like the way that I'm currently thinking, or the way that my thought process works around security and safety, I know that it's off kilter, because I wouldn't even be thinking it was off kilter if it wasn't. Like, for me, it is. Like, I feel like, so the way that I'm being right now, like, it doesn't feel in harmony. It feels like there's like a pull in an opposite direction. And something you said like really struck a chord. I was like, oh wow, that's true. Because I almost felt like, oh dude, I don't want to become like this long-haired hippie that just like goes to the world like being like with his like just being totally oblivious to everything that's going on around him. But when you take the stance of everything is what it is, like, it doesn't mean that you can't meet that character that comes into your awareness. You can't meet them with pure, you can still meet them with pure aggression and protection and whatever you need to do, to like survive is what you need to do, but just accept things for what they are. Like, it is what it is. It doesn't mean you're naive. You're just seeing the world from the reality that you view it, I guess, So walking down the street, I don't need to be like dude with a stick up my ass, but I also don't need to allow someone to like harm me or my family. You know what I mean? I don't need to like constantly be like thriving on that, Yeah, it's an interesting concept, because I think that's been my biggest struggle lately, especially because I've been going into like the spirit world and like really bringing a lot of my judgments down, bringing a lot of my walls down, opening myself up to like authenticity and vulnerability and being like, this is who I am. This is what I struggle with. This is like what I'm trying to achieve. This is what I want to accomplish. This is how I view the world and what I want the world to be. And it is very much like aligned with harmony and peace and like love and not all this stuff. Like being from the military, there's almost like a disillusionment for me. Like, it's like, dude, like I joined the military, granted, I never had to go downrange. I got out of the military on a medical discharge, so it was a little different for me. But looking back on it, it's like, what was I doing? Like I was a cog in a wheel for sure. And for what? So I was just on like a YouTube video with Jubilee Media here in LA. And they asked me if I wanted to be on the show because I was a veteran. I was like, I don't know if you want me on the show as a veteran. I think a little differently than probably most veterans do. And one of the questions they asked was, do you think war is a necessary evil? And I was like, I don't know if necessary is the word I would use. I mean, no, it's not necessary. Is it inevitable? Yeah, I think it's inevitable. But the military industrial complex is real. Like that really is a real thing. It generates business. It generates revenue. If my sons left and were drafted to go fight for our country for a cause that was not just, that's unforgivable to me, And so I feel like a lot of warriors are coming back from war, and I think they love America and they love like what we stand for, freedom and democracy and justice and all these things. But I think they're seeing the hypocrisy in a lot of it. Mm-hmm. Like where it's like, dude, what are we doing? Who's to say that that's the way it's supposed to be? And there's books out there that talk about how we dehumanize our enemies. We don't even refer to them as people. Like we give them names, whether it be Vietnam or we call them slant eyes or gooks or chinks or whatever. And then, with the war on terror, it's like, Hajis, or whatever. It's not, you don't even call them people, because you don't want to like have that connection that understands that like we're all humans in this human experience. And like you said, they're fighting for their cause that they believe in. They believe they're justified in their actions, just like we do. So who's right? And it's maddening when you think about it, especially when you know that like you've lost friends like over there, and you've also lost friends even here, where it's like they come back from that and they can't shake it. They can't shake the PTSD. They can't shake like the experiences they had to endure, and they're having a hard time with that. And it's like you see that and you're like, and all for what? For what? And the 9/11 topic is a juicy topic because did you ever watch Loose Change?
I think I might have, not recently, but I think like way back then.
Yeah, so like it goes into some of the conspiracies, if you will, surrounding 9/11, and I think it's almost like if you were in the military or if you are a red-blooded American, you can't even discuss the possibility that it could have been a hoax, that it could have been totally made up bullshit. You can't, because it takes away from the patriotism. It takes away from like the idea that we all bought into, that most people bought into. And for me, like being like a free thinker, like I will refuse to like shut my mind off to like, oh yeah, this was definitely all orchestrated by these terrible terrorists and whatever. It's like, no. There's too many things in play I just can't accept that. I'm sorry. I can't. I think that there was other things at play that promoted it, allowed it, and put us into this war that we're still in. And for what? Crazy. It's just fucking insane, dude. And like for me, that's where like I think a lot of my anxiety comes from that. Like a lot of my anxiety comes from the ability of not being able to control it, where it's like, fuck man, like what are we doing, dude? Like what are we doing? And it almost feels like I have a spiritual teacher that I work with, and he's awesome. And one of the questions I asked him, I'm going to ask you the same question, is Like, why doesn't he have kids? Why don't you guys have kids? Like, you guys are the guys that, like, in my opinion, the way that I view it, are enlightened beings. Like, you have an understanding of the way reality works and the world works differently from what the mainstream media or the mainstream society wants us to believe. They want to put us in a box, and you go to work, or you go to college, you get a degree, you get a job, you get a family, you retire, and you die. And that's the end of it, you know? I think you guys view the world from a different place. And so I feel like if you guys had kids, it would be doing the world a service. Mm-hmm. It's not a judgment that you don't have kids. It's more of like a compliment to the fact that I think you should, because it's like, that's what the world needs, is more people that are awakened, more people that are awakened to the idea that maybe the way that we viewed things for so long was total bullshit. And it's not true. There's so much more to this world. There's so much more to what's out there. So what is your take on that? Why don't you have kids? And what's your hesitation to having a family?
There's this concept of YOLO, right? Mm-hmm. You only live once, and that's the scenario you just said. Like, you get educated, you get a job, you get married. Maybe before you get married, you line up as much blowjobs as you can, and then you die. And so you kind of want to like fit in all of this stuff, this life purpose stuff. But if you have an understanding that all of that is just like a prescription to a story, that like, I'm just not there. I'm not on that story. I didn't come here in this life to like shack myself up in a square box and separate myself from the rest of society and like just care about this like little being that I made with the woman, and like and shelter myself off from the world. Like, I'm here for like this, right?
Yeah.
Our voices right now are going out to many people, and the thought that like it's just going to go into another version of me, it's alluring, but like it's unnecessary, and I feel like it's inefficient.
You don't feel like there's like a sense of like, you don't feel like almost like a, I don't know, I'm not gonna say responsibility, that's a little heavy, but like a call to it, to be like, dude, like, I want to do my best to like, it's like a force multiplier, you know? If you had like a bunch of little raws around, it's like, then it's like, okay, cool, now you have like, it doesn't die with you. I mean, obviously, like the people that are listening to this podcast, maybe some of them will hate it, some of them will be enlightened by it, who knows what their perception of it will be, but we're making changes, we're making ripples out into the world to like get people to like maybe open up a little bit more. But maybe if you had children, they could do the same thing, and it becomes even more like,
right,
I don't know,
within the construct of the way reality is right now. I feel that having a family in America especially does not align with my resonance. I think that if there is a family scenario in the future, it's going to be the classic commune.
Oh, totally, dude.
That like all spiritual like leaders end up trying to fulfill, and it usually gets shut down by the government or the other people that have other interests in capitalism and control. So all of those, like all the people like Jim Jones, yeah. Some guy just like messaged me about him yesterday. He's like trying to convince me so hard that like everything I say is silly and wrong. And he brings up Jim Jones, and dude, like if you look into the Jim Jones scenario, like that wasn't a mass suicide. Like those were murders. Like doctors went in there and noticed that there were needle marks in every single person's shoulder, like where you can't needle yourself. Everyone got chased down and killed because like these people that Osho, like there's a whole Netflix thing.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I've watched on TV in the last few, like many years, because my friend told me I should watch it. And it's like completely like making this whole thing against Osho, and they don't even really mention that it's Osho. They have his old name. But he was also outcast from not only this country but India, for spreading these messages of harmony that don't agree with our notion of the family, right? Like it's you're expanding the notion of the family, where it's basically, it takes a village to raise a child. Like, yeah, that means that, like, it's not two people shacked up with this like contract that they can only be with each other and they need to sleep in the same bed, and they like all of this is a construct that builds a lot of fear and jealousy, because we're not naturally like that. So we've got two people that are now distracted with trying to maintain a relationship that is unnatural, and eventually most marriages end in divorce. So now you have two people that feel like failures. And I mean, this entire story just it's unresonant with me. And I feel like I couldn't just impregnate a woman and give her the gift of my genetic energy.
Right.
And also do that with other women. And I feel like I can't do what I feel is harmonious to the world and develop like a commune type scenario to a great degree. I feel like that's not possible the way the world is right now. And maybe the world's going to change, right? We already see the breakdown of relationships happening and everyone thinks it's a bad thing. Well, I don't see anything as bad or good. It's just what's happening. So then I learn to deconstruct and analyze why this is happening. Why with the internet are relationships harder to hold? Because people get access to other people. That's how it is. And that's our ascension as a species. We will start harmonizing as an entire group. And this notion of separate countries, separate cultures, even separate families are going to start dissolving. Yeah. And so I don't want to partake in a version of discrimination, because that's what a family is. You're now discriminating against everybody else, and you are secured in the notion that my family is most important. Right. And that extends to my race is most important and my country is most important. And that's where things like war are justified. Things like racism are justified. And so I like when you're asking like why, it's because we probably both see the same things and we don't want to participate in something that we don't agree with.
Yeah. And it's funny because he said the same thing when I asked him that question about having like a commune type deal. And it's funny because when you say that word commune, I think most people hear it and be like, oh, Jesus, here we go. But if you think about it on a deeper level, I think you can understand the meaning behind it. Like, why is that beneficial? It's beneficial for many, many reasons. And this is a conversation my wife and I have been having where it's like, talking about like an open relationship, talking about people that are swingers, people that, are out in the world just doing their thing, enjoying all the pleasures of life. And, I don't know if I know I'm not there yet, but it's been a topic that we bring up because it's like, I want to challenge my beliefs. I want to challenge my ideas. I want to challenge like why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. And I'm not going to judge somebody else for being like, okay, you want to be a swinger? You want to have an open relationship? Good for you. At the end of the day, like you said, most marriages end in divorce. Most. Mm-hmm. Well, why is that? And I think it's for all the reasons you mentioned, like jealousy and like just gritty, I'm just going to work it out for the kids. I just had a conversation with somebody on the way here, and it's like they're staying in a marriage because they don't want to miss any time with their children. And it's like, okay, I get that. But like, at what point are you going to have some sense of regret? Your kids are eventually going to leave the nest and go and do their own thing and be on their own like trajectory of wherever they're going in life. And you're going to be left there being like, dude, I maybe you wasted some of that time. I mean, I've had multiple people in my life like where they've had parents that stayed together and they're more upset that their parents stayed together than got divorced because it's like, it was so like terrible. Like just watching the interaction between their parents, like no love, a lot of like hatred, a lot of jealousy, a lot of anger. And who wants to live in that?
Right.
I don't know. And so I see the value in having I can see the value of why a commune would be started. I see the value of why they say that it takes a village to raise a child. I see the value in like breaking down some of those barriers. But I also see the value in the tribe. I think that there was a reason behind marriage. I think there was a reason behind how it even got started. I don't think it was all a sense of control. I think that was part of it, but I think the other part of it was just pure survival. And I don't know. I mean, esoterically, I don't know why or even when marriages became a thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to own this person. Like this person belongs to me. And then we're going to have children. Those children belong to me. I think part of that was maybe a security thing. But yeah, I think it maybe on a deeper level, it was a sense of control, to like kind of distract from the bigger picture. And yeah, that's kind of my another mind fuck. Yeah. I start thinking about it too much.
I have thought if I'm going to have kids, I would prefer to be with a woman who I'm not in a relationship with. Because it causes a love triangle, right? You've got the love between the mom and the dad, and then the love between the mom and the child, and the dad and the child. And what I perceive happening, and this doesn't have to, I don't have to spell this into existence, but it seems like with that structure, the love between the mom and the dad starts to interrupt the love between each of them and the child. And if the child were to grow up in best case scenario, that connection between the mother and father remains strong and harmonious. And so to prevent that, then maybe there doesn't need to be a connection between the mom and the dad together. But these are all, I'm not claiming to know, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's just like these, it's just, again, me asking questions and kind of going with
I think it's healthy. I think it's a healthy topic. I think it's something healthy to like talk about. I think if we get stuck, I think that's, in my opinion, that is where we get into a lot of like, just negativity, is where we get so stuck in our way of thinking. We're not even willing to hear anything else. It's like, nope, I'm shutting it out. That's bullshit. That's stupid. It's like, all right, man, well, you just missed an opportunity then, potentially, And that's something that actually, before I even got married to my wife, that's something we had talked about because we had both been married before. And she was like, well, you're a cool guy. You seem like you're evolved and you're like learning new things and you're like dynamic and you just stay out there and you're always willing to learn. And I'm the same way. So like, maybe we'll just have a kid together. We don't need to get married. And so we actually entertained that idea, like before we ended up ultimately getting married. And so, yeah, we still question everything, you know what I mean? Like, and it's same like you, man. I'm not saying that I know the right way or that I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it all out. Right. What do you think the meaning of life is, or what would you define as the meaning of life or your greater purpose of being here?
So I think everyone's meaning is different. But I look at life as so it depends on how I construct reality, right? Like this could be an electronic matrix that we made up and we're kind of just like here practicing for something, for like the real reality,
right?
And I think that whether you like take that stance that like this is all a matrix, or this is a matrix, a physical matrix, and we're spiritual, like consciousness expressing ourselves as physical beings that are in the illusion of separateness so that we can have a life experience. I think in either of those cases, the purpose is to learn something and not so much about the experiences and trying to have better and better experiences. It's the knowledge of self and our power. And I feel like we're in this physical reality seemingly with limited access to our potential, right? I know people that can levitate. I know people that are psychic. I know people that know what I'm saying right now. I know people that can feel other people like exactly like as if they were feeling it. Like I've got a spectrum of people that I know have these powers, so they're real. I can read about these powers in books. And then I ask myself like, well, why don't we have all of these powers, right? And I can see that there is a state of being where we do, but for whatever reason, we're here on this plane of existence, suppressed, and I can only fathom that the reason for that is because we are learning the usage of our technology. And then if you think about like the God figures in the stories, right, and think about them not as as fiction, but think about them like maybe this is possible even for myself, right?
Yeah.
What how dangerous would it be if I could, whatever I think comes to existence, like immediately? It would be quite dangerous for most of us.
Right.
And so life is sort of learning so that we're not giving ourselves a machine gun before we know how to use it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that these non-physical, because all of these powers come from like almost like a non-physical source. And you get tuned into these sources, and once we die, we no longer have this physical jail, because it's almost like the physical body prevents us from using these most of the esoteric teaching that I just mentioned, levitation and all that stuff. It defies physical reality because it's using forces outside of this physical reality. And once we disincorporate from this physical reality, we will be those forces. And so the question is, why are we here now? And it's so that we can get sprinklings of these forces within our life experience and learn how to use them, so that when we go back, and maybe we have to come back and learn more many lifetimes. This is like the notion of reincarnation. You didn't learn the lesson this life. What kind of life do you want next to teach you this lesson? Because in order to become one and stay within the construct of like the grand universe, we really have to understand our powers. And so the purpose of life is to basically realize how to use the technology of ourself, the technology first of the human being, of the physical, of our physical beings, but like how do we be all that there is,
right,
responsibly?
Yeah.
And so when you look at karma and these stories of reincarnation, it all centers around like, if you don't learn lessons that you're meant to learn, you have to re-experience life.
Right.
And that's staying in this lower level. This is cyclical, multiple lifetime level. But if you learn, you can kind of like come out of it and start basically becoming more non-physical. Yeah, I mean, there's many. Okay, so a different way of looking at it is to realize our perspective point in all that there is. And understand that we are everything already. And for whatever reason, we're here in this physical body without being able to feel other physical bodies. And then you can start like constructing what we're made up of and why we're physically here. And the realization that comes is that like everything is as it is, and we really have we have the ability to perceive different versions. So like there's a part of me that can only perceive myself here, right? I call myself Ra. And then there's the same part of me that can perceive myself as the solar system. And the same part of myself, but just a different level of existence that can perceive itself as the universe, and maybe multiple universes. And like the base level of all this would just be light, air, earth, water, right? Like all of that. So it's basically light. Light makes up all of that. But we can look at rock as being conscious. And this could be like the hell scenario of many of the traditions, like at the lowest level. Like if we did really bad here, we need to go down a couple levels, and we go down to what we call hell. And it's just this like everlasting, timeless, agonizing state. And if you think like what it would be like to be a rock, like that's kind of like, that is a hell scenario. You're just like there baking in the sun for all of eternity, right? Well, eventually you would ascend this level, this concept of ascension. You would ascend out of that, and you would get to perceive yourself as the rock being either a plant or an animal. Let's just say a plant. So now you have, let's put plants and animals on the same level. You have awareness. So what it took to ascend to the next perspective point is awareness. So if you don't graduate into the level of awareness, you remain earth. You remain like an element. When you realize awareness, then you're able to be reborn, so to speak, as a plant. And then there's many lessons as plants and animals. And essentially, the graduation to go from plants and animals to humans like we are is the notion of self-awareness. So you can look at a plant or you can look at a certain animal, you can realize that they don't have self-awareness, right? There's a big spectrum of awareness to self-awareness. For a lot of animals, they've got awareness, meaning they know, like when they're thirsty, they drink. When they're like they're aware of their needs and they attain their needs. Right. But then if you look at like a gorilla, which is more close to a human, you can see that they have self-awareness and they prioritize their reality towards self. They set up perimeters, right? They have families and they protect themselves. Not all animals are like that, right? They're just like flying through the air and like they're just going to eat and then they get eaten one day, and there's not really a sense of self-awareness. At our human state, so once you as an animal have lived enough lifetimes and attained that conscious part of yourself, has lived and recycled through the plant and animal phase enough times to attain self-awareness, then you're able to be born as a human. And as a human, we are self-aware. And at lower state humans, right? So in the animals, lower state animals are just aware, and you begin to realize self-awareness. And once you hit a critical point, then you become a human. Lower state humans are very, very self-aware. They're rooted in self-awareness. They want everything's about themselves. Everything's about themselves. Well, the high spectrum, close to the next stage of ascension, is it's basically awareness of the whole. So the humans that are very like, basically they could have been a gorilla last lifetime, like they're like in the desert shooting their guns and just caring about jacking off and basically just gratifying self. Okay. Right. And those are very judgmental things I just said on purpose. So the higher, like almost ready to be born into the next phase, which is where we can basically all harmonize as one human species, is the people that can feel each other. We're as a species doing this, and we all kind of ascend together, right? Like you mentioned the soul contract. Well, like we don't have individual souls. Like there is one consciousness expressing itself differently through all these different beings. And so we can look at it from an individual level of an ascension, and we can look at it from a global level of an ascension. So it gets a little confusing the way I talk about it, because sometimes I'm talking about individuals, sometimes I'm talking about global stuff. Eventually we all become one, but I'll get there. So the greater, like the closer to the next phase starts realizing the connection, and the internet's an example of that. Through technology, we are becoming aware of the whole. We're starting to care. What technology is going to go to, which I'd love to invent, is our Instagram channels and our social media channels are going to have a dialogue box of how we feel. And that's going to be, maybe it's going to be a wrist thing we wear, maybe it's going to be chips that are implanted into us at birth in several generations, and our social media profile is going to have how we feel. And as a species, we're going to be able to look onto these devices and see how everybody in Africa feels and everybody in New York feels. And we can see that out of all the people that ate this thing, this is how they feel now. Or all the people that watched this show, this is how they feel now. And we're all going to start becoming interested. That sounds scary to some people, but it's not, because it's going to gamify. It's kind of what we're doing now in a way, just not on that level, you know? We're going to start gamifying everybody feeling good. Yep. Like we're going to start knowing, and we're going to start like calibrating our life based on like, oh, what are the people that are feeling best doing? And just start, and we're going to, as a species, become aware of all of our individual selves. And that's the next level of ascension, is like once we realize awareness of all, then we're in to the next level of ascension, which is a different version of humanity where we can all feel each other. So once we learn to care about what other people feel, then we graduate to a point where we actually have just like instant connection, so that I know what you're feeling. If you're hungry, I'm hungry. Right? Mm-hmm. And as a complete 10 billion species organism on the planet, we have that hive mind, and we're all interacting as billions of people, but almost like one feeling state. And when we when we can tap into the experiences of each other, you can see how this is like a grand unified experience.
Right.
And eventually we start to lose the need for these bodies, because we start to feel all there is to feel, know all there is to know, and we start to eventually just disembody, and we will just exist in a bodiless state. Like once we harmonize with each other, know all there is to know, and feel all there is to feel, there's no more reason for human existence, and we ascend into this other level of consciousness where there's no body. And when you start looking at things like Abraham Hicks and all these people that are channeling, usually they're channeling beings from this state. They're non-bodied entities that were once an entire planet's worth of people, and now they're in a or several people that are now in a non-body state, and they can implant themselves into the consciousness of a body, maybe because that's just where they came from, right? And now they have this better perspective of all, and time doesn't exist in this level, and eventually from here you have other prerogatives. But eventually you go back to just being light, like going back to just the state of all things. And there's a lot of lessons in there when we just think about everyday life and like, why are we here, right?
Yeah.
Because if the goal for me, according to both of those scenarios I just laid out, the goal is to realize connection with all things, right? And that's like the basis of everything I say. Like, don't complain about your reality, because you are reality. You are everything. And so
how would you define, like, if, like, in this reality, how would you define, like, success? Like, if you are, like, reality, and, I mean, do you still feel a sense of wanting certain things? Like, where it's like, I want to have, like, a big house, or I want to have this type of car, or I want to have this kind of money, or I want to have whatever, like this ability to like move about. Do you have like wants or desires, or is it more like
not
you're
like
just
that?
No.
I've had the ability to walk into a car dealership and buy whatever car I wanted. I've made a lot of money. I've lived in houses at the top of the Hollywood Hills. Like I've been with like the most gorgeous girls I can imagine, and really what I define as success is doing what I want. And
right.
And for the most part, those things don't interest me anymore, because living up at the top of the Hollywood Hills, where I would sit on my deck and look at airplanes flying underneath me, and then the city of Los Angeles, like as far as I could see, all that came to being was like, this isn't worth working for. Like, this isn't worth trying for.
Right.
Like, nothing is worth stressing over. I've literally attained I've been to the point where I couldn't buy anything on the internet because I've purchased everything that I've wanted to. And how did I attain that money? By working out every day. Like, I literally don't work and I have everything that I want.
Yeah.
I'm going to just now not stress. Like, I don't want this stress. I don't want this anxiety. What are the things I don't want, and why am I still allowing that to be, right? So I get rid of the gym. Going into nature, connecting on that level, for me I would say the last few years seems to be what I wanted, right? And at that level, you don't need money. If I'm going into the forest every single day, we don't need the green pieces of paper for that. But what do I need? I need time. I need
transportation to get there.
Right, friends if I want, and I need like just things to think about. And I was able to attain all of that. So really the goal is to not want, right? To not desire, and to realize that in this moment. So I like led this crazy Kriya for my two friends the other day, and it was right at sunset. So we finished this like pretty exhaustive Kriya, which is from kriyaoftheweek.com, which is a website I have. And we finished, and then we were just like opened our eyes and we were staring at the sunset, and like that harmony, that feeling of just like like we weren't thinking about anything else. It was just like we tuned our body up. We were vibrating at a very high level, and then now we're watching the sunset, sitting in the soft grass. Like we're even leaning. We even had like something to lean back against. It's like we were just lounging in the most perfect, comfortable position. And the goal, if you were to say like I have a desire, is to grab that feeling in every moment of existence. And I'm pretty good doing that, right? Even as my business is closing, even as like a girlfriend is arguing with me because her emotions are disrupted, like I'm pretty good at feeling, I'm pretty good at holding on to that harmony. And for me, that's what I desire, is just like finding that harmony in every situation and in all times, and then using that resonance to guide every step that I take.
It's, I think the challenge, I think for a lot of people, and for me included, was, you know, like going into that world, going into the spirit world, and having a deep knowing and understanding that that's the end game. You know what I mean? Is like oneness with everything, but still existing in this reality, you know. And I explained this to my spiritual teacher. I was like, how do you get to a place where, you know, you have things that like a mortgage and a car payment if you have one, or like things you need to buy for your kids and like things like that, but you see the craziness in attaining all that stuff. You see the craziness in like, dude, I'm gonna go work for a paycheck for something I don't even care about. Like I'm not passionate about this at all. Like I'm just doing it. It's like as a means to an end. Like that's it. That's the only reason behind it. And so like my goal, I guess, for myself was like finding a way to like do things that I'm passionate about, like this podcast, and like monetize it to where like I'm sending stuff out into the world, but at the same time I need to make money at it because it's what provides me to like for the travel and all the other things that I want to do. So how would you tell someone to find that balance of like staying in tune with like the oneness, but at the same time like being able to produce and like exist, you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so that reminds me of like owning gyms.
Yeah.
What you're explaining is like, it's not really, it can come instantaneously, but that's like a person walking into a gym and then like, hey, how do I become like this supermodel that I see on the cover of this magazine? I want that now. Like after living their entire life eating fast food and stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, recognize that it's a journey and that you're going to like be taking small actionable steps, right? You're going to start changing your diet, but you don't have to eat like me, right? I've been doing this for 50 at the time. It was like, I'm now looking at the type of blueberries that I'm eating and like what farms they come from. Like that level of pickiness comes because of it's at the 15-year end of like a gradual, like step one for me was stop drinking soda, right? So maybe just focus on step one right now and don't worry about like being one with all, because that's a journey and you're going to miss out on even the experience of the journey if you're focusing on the finish line of even becoming one with all or enlightened or whatever the term you want to use. And then you understand like even that's not important. Right? Like living and chasing, I'm lucky enough that I experienced the wealthy, like I experienced success in business to a point where I was just like, oh, I don't need this, right? And there's no, like, whatever is when it comes to finances. And so it's the same thing with this spiritual thing, right? Like I am at the state that I am right now, and it's just like some of the things I have are valuable to some people, but definitely I'm still on the journey. And I'm not trying to tell people to be like me. I'm just sharing my experience, but I also don't want people to think that they should be this way, because then it like almost sets up like trying to live at the top of the hill mentality, and you kind of get distracted from really what's important, because once you get there you might not like it. It's just not a goal. There's no finish line.
Yeah, it felt like there was a lot of guys that I was around in the spirit world that were, you know, doing men's work with me and stuff, where there was a lot of like, you know, damn the man, like this is all bullshit, and they're questioning a lot of things, which is healthy, but then they're also like struggling to like find like reliable transportation. They're like struggling with how to pay their rent. They're struggling with like day-to-day things that like are required of life. Like you just need to coexist in this world. Like you need to pay your bills. You need to like do things, even though it sounds asinine and crazy. It's just the reality that we're in right now. So for me, it was like, it's been challenging to find that balance of like, I see the craziness in it all, but at the same time, I still need to produce and take actionable steps to like provide for the things that like I have in my reality right now. But that makes sense. So yeah, like you're looking at the end game. Like for me, I'm looking at the end game. Like I know what it is for me. But like maybe hyper focusing on that is not helping like me. I'm like missing the journey. I'm missing the part. Yeah. That makes sense.
Cause like money is an interesting concept. We can attain the things that we need by trading the green pieces of the green pieces of paper, but like it's like, and then to attain the green pieces of paper, there's a program, right? And that program's highly like moldable. Like we can do work, we can make ourselves valuable, and we can get the green pieces of paper, or we can just make ourselves attractive and ask for green pieces of paper by trading our time, or get pictures taken of us. Like there's all sorts of ways that people, or we could take people and make them our slaves and oppress them and use them to our advantage. There's a lot of ways to get these green pieces of paper, but the green pieces of paper are really not what we want. We're going to take those green pieces of paper, we're going to trade them in for something. And we want that more than we want the green pieces of paper. But if we don't have the green pieces of paper, what we think is important is getting the green pieces of paper, because all we can see is that we can get the things. But just like there was a lot of different ways to get the green pieces of paper, there's a lot of different ways to attain the things that the green pieces of paper attain, and the green pieces of paper is just one of the ways. And if we can, and so like the green pieces of paper is going to buy us a house, well, there's other ways to get into houses besides the green pieces of paper, and people don't realize that sometimes they have the things that they have even though they have the things that they would want with the money even though they don't have the money. Okay, so then one step into that, like the house or the car or the things that we're going to buy with the green pieces of paper, we still don't even want that. Like you want a certain type of car, not because you need transportation, because you could have any other type of car, but like there's something about this type of car that you want, and you're going to get some feeling out of living in a certain type of house, having a certain type of experience, or driving a certain type of car, and that feeling is actually what you want. So we think we want the green pieces of paper, then we think that we want the thing that the green pieces of paper are going to buy, and then then there's the feeling, and sometimes that feeling, there's another feeling, like feeling confident might allow you to feel safe. Yeah. So really what we want is safety. And guess what? Like at the end of it all, you the feelings that you get, it's free, and there's really no energy required. Right. So like it's almost like where you have the wormhole where you can take like I'm explaining this on a mat right now on a two-dimensional surface. If I took this mat and I just connected the feeling state to where we are now, and then it goes back to like the best way to even go through that scenario is to feel who you are, like to bring that future self to us now, and then we kind of can like get the green piece of paper, the car, and the feeling state. Like we're gonna be like more in tune to go through that. Right.
That's crazy. It's like I love like thinking like that, and there would be times where I would go down the rabbit hole with it, and like I said, it would like induce a little bit of anxiety, because I'm like, dude, what is this all for? Like, what am I doing? You know? And I remember having this conversation with my wife in 2011. And I remember where we were. We were driving to Guerneville, in Northern California. And I was like, who says what money is? Who says what that is? And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, what's the value? It's just a piece of paper. But like, who's putting the value behind that? Like, we're all part of the system. We're all part of like the system that says like that dollar is worth $1. Mm-hmm. And who's to say what the dollar is buying is worth $1 that you're paying for it? And I just go down like this crazy rabbit hole. Like, dude, what am I doing? And so now it's kind of like I said, just trying to find the balance of like knowing what I want out of life, but like still trying to get to a place where I'm vibrating to that frequency. Like I'm vibrating to that like resonance, whatever that is. Like what's the feeling of getting to where it is that I want to be? And that's a good like work to do, to be like, okay, like is it the car that you want? Like I've never really like right now I drive a Suburban and it's paid off, and I'm like, why do I have this? I should probably sell this. And it would help me financially to sell it, you know, to get some of those green pieces of paper because somebody sees value in that. So like, cool, it helped me out financially, get out of a little bit of a hole. Awesome. And I'm not attached to what I drive. Like I used to be, you know, because it was like a status symbol. You know, I have a fully loaded Suburban, blah, 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 and I'm pulling up on job sites and it was great. But I don't care about that anymore. Like I would literally drive a minivan or a VW Bug, like whatever, just to get me from point A to point B. I don't care what it is, you know? So I'm letting go of like those attachments. Same thing with my house. I have a nice big house, like, but I don't care about that house. Right. It doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean? Like it's not important to me. What's important to me is just freedom. That's it. That's what I want. But then you can break that down even like, well, what is it about the freedom that like, what's the feeling behind it? And yeah, we can go on and on.
But that's the quote work that people talk about in these like spiritual communities and men's groups or women's groups. Like that's the work that we do, is like looking at our life and seeing like what we, and realizing and figuring out what we want, and then looking and just asking questions like, wait, I want to be at the beach every day. Well, why am I living in a house that's an hour and a half away from the beach? You know, like, and then you have to do the work of getting yourself out of that matrix and like going with your feelings. Because like I mentioned about sleep and those cosmic codes coming in, I know that our feelings are not ours. Right, our thoughts are not ours, and if we have these desires, and we have these attunements, ask ourselves like, what if it's not me? What if this is the map? And that's actually what I think my superpower is that I read reality, and I read my thoughts as not just like me thinking about some self-motivated thing. But like I see the things that I see, and they stick out. I hear people say things to me. I'm observing my thoughts, and I'm following the map, because I feel that there's a greater version of me, for lack of better words, that is outside of this physical body that's got like kind of playing me as a character. And as long as I can make the character of me in better alignment with whatever is flowing or channeling itself through me, like that's kind of like more towards like the purpose of life, is like, if what you feel, like get yourself to feel as much in harmony with what you're actually being. And if you feel that, like, if you start recognizing things in your life that don't match what you feel, then there's something, like, you have work to do. Yeah. Make it so that it feels right.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would you say to somebody that is like on the verge, or like they know that something needs to shift? They know that something needs to change. And like you said, like, your reality is going to be different than my reality. Like, if I'm seeing somebody smoke and I'm like judging that, like, oh, it's bad, it's terrible, that's their reality and they're in it and that's all good. But what I think that there's a universal, not universal map, but like maybe something that would work for everyone if they just did it. You know, if they just tried like this approach. Would there be approach or like a ritual that you would give people to do to like just maybe make them feel a little bit better? If it, like a morning ritual, if you will, like, what's the best way? And like going to bed, I love that. Like, going to bed, don't go to bed with all the anxieties of this reality. Go to bed with the resonance of the reality that you want. That's fucking amazing. But what about like a morning ritual when you wake up to start your day? What's the best way to do that, in your opinion?
So this is actually, I mean, I was going to say cold shower, and I'll have something else to say about that. But the reason why the cold showers are like sweeping the planet right now is because this is our nature. Like, having comfort is actually, it's destroying the nature of the human being.
Totally.
Right? Like, and so the comfort of a warm bath, like, actually a hot shower is actually kind of like, it burns your skin, but we've deadened the skin so much that all we feel is that hot water going through our deadened skin and hitting our muscles, and it feels really good. So we want that. But if you take cold showers for a few years, you can't even, and if I get into the shower with somebody else, like another female or something, and they put on their hot water, it's like scalding me. And it's just normal to them. And I'm just like, what the heck? How do you stand in this every day?
It's crazy. I was doing the cold showers like a lot, like pretty much. I think I did it I was doing it like in months at a time increments, right? And because of like the back surgeries and the rods and the screws and everything else I have in my back, like I kept getting like knotted up. I'll get like knots all the way down my spine and like whatever. But I have a knowing that that's not about the rods or the screws or anything in my back. It has everything to do with resisting. It has everything to do with like I was tensing my body up. I wasn't breathing into it. I wasn't allowing, and like that's what was causing it. So I started the cold showers again, and I haven't had those same symptoms. I've only had, feeling amazing. You know what I mean? I get into the cold shower, but there have been times where I'm like, you know what? I'm not feeling very well. I'm feeling a little tight right now. I'm gonna go ahead and take a hot like shower, and I get into that thing, and it's like scalding hot. Like I'm like, Jesus, dude. Like so I'm like turning the knob like down toward the cold, because even what used to be bearable for me, where like this is a hot shower, is unbearable.
Right.
I can't even. I'm like, dude, this is not cool. Like, what is going on? I was like, did someone fuck with the water heater?
No, you start turning it back to like lukewarm, right? Like lukewarm is now you're hot, and then like so. I'm talking about that, because people need to realize that, like, actually a hot shower is, like, your comfort could be damaging you. You don't even know it. Like, there's things that your skin
comfort kills
does for you, and you're pretty much burning it every single day. But you've been doing it. It's like a smoker. Like, you do it every single day. Your body adapts to it. Okay, but that goes into, like, the actual, like you said, someone's on the verge of like, what we need in this state, like what all the things we're talking about, the base level necessity is that we find comfort in the present moment, and almost releasing it's releasing of attachments and complete acceptance of what is. And that's a cold shower does that perfectly.
Right. And
so starting your day with a cold shower, or even a meditation, no one knows what the word Kriya means. It means to do in Sanskrit. And so this website I have, Kriya of the Week, it suggested that you do it in the morning for the exact reason that you would do a cold shower. Because a lot of the techniques that we do are about strengthening the nervous system and clearing energy and harmonizing oneself. And that requires a little bit of uncomfortness. And getting into that uncomfortness first thing in the morning allows you to stay attuned to the uncertainty of being in the flow. Yeah. We all want to be in the flow. We all want things to flow, but we also don't want to let go of the things that we know. And really, in order to get to that flow state, we have to let go of the things that we know, and we have to be comfortable being uncertain. Like any step of the day could be a life-changing thing. And like some of us live that way. Every day for me could be like life-changing. Yeah. And I just accept it and I go along, and there's highs and lows, and it's tremendously exciting, and there's a lot of trust that I need. There's a lot of ability to maintain present moment awareness even if things are uncomfortably like uncertain.
Right.
And so starting your day with something that's good for you, a cold shower is good for you. Yep. Doing a Kriya is good for you. But because it's good for you, it puts you in a state that you're not really comfortable being in.
Yeah, you articulated that way better than I would have, because the way that my mindset has worked in the past, I understand it. What you're saying now, it's like that's perfect. Like it hits, and I'm like, yeah, that landed good. But I was trying to explain that to other people about the cold showers, and it's like comfort kills. Like, do you understand? Like, it's like you get into like a warm, hot shower, and like you said, it's burning your skin, and then it's like I can eat like mostly plant-based, organic meats, like whatever, that maybe aren't always going to taste the best. They're not going to like light me on fire like as if I went to McDonald's and got like a double quarter pounder with cheese with salted ass fries and soda. You know what I mean? It's going to like throw off all these chemicals in my brain and my body. They're going to make me feel amazing for that moment. But then I'm going to get to a place where like I'm like totally out of alignment. You know, I'm like overweight and I'm feeling like shit. So with the cold showers, like I started it again because I felt like my mindset was like super important to get to a point where it's like mindset's everything. And I have to do the things that are uncomfortable every once in a while. You know, I have to put myself into the fire intentionally so I can like withstand the forces of life. That's the way that I always like describe it. Like I want to be able to like do the shit that sucks on the regular and be okay with it. On my call with the men's group on Tuesday, that was one of the things I talked about was, I felt like I was losing my edge a little bit. We good?
I'm actually just looking for my phone.
I think.
But, cause I had a meeting at 1, but,
okay. I think it's 1, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right.
I forget where it is, but did you pause that?
No, I'm just clapping. So now he'll hear it. So he'll know when to, which one.
It could stay on there.
Yeah. No, so I think, for me, I've always I felt like I was getting to a point of being too soft, and I was softening my stances in life as far as like my judgments and the way that I saw the world and the way that I see people and situations. But I was almost losing the edge of like who I am, my nature, which is being a powerful man, you know? And it's like, I wasn't doing the things that I should have been doing in regards to my fitness, in regards to my diet, in regards to like taking the cold showers, in regards to breath work, in regards to meditation. Like all that shit is not like the funnest to do. Like it's not always fun when I'm tired and my kids are up all night and like whatever. It's like, oh, I'm going to go work out right now. It's like, no, I'm really tired right now. I'd much rather lay on the couch and be on my phone or whatever. So it's like getting out of like that state of like just comfortability. I think is super, super important. But you articulate obviously way better than I did as far as in terms of like the cold shower and like why you should do it. Because I really do think I try and like tell people, like, especially within my family, you know, like why I take cold showers and why it's important to me. And maybe now that I've heard your interpretation of why, I can like maybe articulate a little bit better so they understand it.
Awesome. Yeah. It's not just about getting into a cold shower. It's about like being happy about getting into a cold shower.
Totally. And that was kind of like David Goggins. Do you ever listen to any of his stuff?
I mean, I know who he is. I'm not much of a consumer of information.
Yeah. So he's like, I love like his mindset. And it's like basically his thing is like callousing your mind to be able to do anything, to push your limits on every level of life. And when your body is done, your mind will be done way before that. Typically, your mind will quit way before your body's ready to. So if you push yourself past like limits, you don't even know what your limits are until you just go past them. Like the limits of what's possible, you won't know until you go into the impossible.
Right.
And so I love like his mindset. And that's kind of like, I mean, I know the cold showers isn't even close to where David Goggins, he doesn't even take cold showers. He's like, I already know I can do it. So like, why am I going to do that? But that's kind of the mindset for me of what it is. Like, no, I'm going to do things that purposely are not like comfortable. You know, like I'm going to take a cold shower because taking a hot shower is comfortable. I'm going to eat like plant-based, mostly organic food because that's harder to do. It's very easy for me to go through a drive-thru and get a bean and cheese burrito because I love bean and cheese burritos, but then my body's going to suffer as a result. Like I had my first like panic attack in a very long time the other day. And when did it happen? Right after I went to McDonald's to take my kids to get a Happy Meal and I ate 2 of the cheeseburgers. Is there like a correlation there? I think there is.
Yeah.
I haven't ate that food in a long time. You know what I mean? Like, and then all of a sudden I'm putting this like basically poison into my body.
Right.
And it totally jacked my like everything up. I felt like shit. So I guess the next question I want to ask you is, where do you see yourself like going? Like what's your biggest goal right now? Like what is your mission in life? What is your vision for where Raw is going to go?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. I actually can't see into my future. I don't know. Actually, there's a lot of things that I could be doing. I'm part of a few projects, and there's a lot of choices and decisions I need to make. Including like, do I stay in LA or do I leave America? Like there's a lot of stuff, and it goes back to reading reality. Like when I actually kind of intended to have some of these things fall away And I was mentioning to you before the show, one of them has kind of dissolved, and I'm happy about it, like because now that's one less decision I need to make.
Right.
So I'm gonna just look out for those connections, right? When having to do with one of these directions of me going, when it feels like I almost feel this trust coming out of my heart, like I'm supposed to be going this way.
Yeah.
That's the way that I'll go. And
so you don't do that work before you go to bed? Like you don't have like a vision for yourself where it's like, this is kind of like the reality that I want, and this is like where I'm kind of going?
I'm currently in a very clouded state. There's a lot of good things on the horizon, a lot like basically like world-changing project, both can make a lot of money. I've got my website, Create of the Week, which also is making money and has a lot of great potential. I can put a lot more effort into that. I've got my superfoods business. There's a lot of things, and currently I have not intended to figure out which direction I'm going.
Got it.
It's not there. However, I did take step one. Like I said the other day, I don't even remember when I did, but I did do some intentional like I need a little bit more focus here, and then like immediately one of these things kind of dropped off the plate.
Yep.
So
that's awesome.
It's really just, yeah, you're right. Like I could just easily intend for focus, but I admittedly haven't done that.
So what are the, if you don't mind plugging your website and your Whole Foods business, if you don't mind plugging those on here so people can...
So I've got rawofearth.com is my website. That's my general website. And on there you find kriyaoftheweek.com, which is a membership-based website. It's $11.11 a month. And we do daily kriyas, and they change every week. And people basically attune themselves into a lot of states of being that we're talking about on this show. And then there's a bunch of superfoods on there, which are also, like, in my opinion, the best foods available in America. The guy who brought coconut oil into this country, the guy who brought chia seeds into this country, like the leading expert of nutrition. He's been molding the health and wellness culture in America for many decades. And
Dave Sullivan?
Sandoval.
Oh, Sandoval.
And all over the world. But so it's a network marketing company, and we've got a superstar team. A lot of us are in LA, a lot of us are all over the world. And network marketing, a lot of people have bad connotations towards it, because historically network marketing companies have been able to make money, or at least the people in it have been able to make money with crappy products. Like, so network marketing companies have been like representing not high quality products, but as the internet age is like basically self-selecting, right? Like Herbalife is being sued for all of this stuff. Advocare just got basically shut down by one of the FDA or one of these FCC, one of these organizations. This company's never had a product recall in like 26 years. It just became network marketing 7 years ago because it had to keep the quality standards. And so we're a new company, and it's awesome. It's super awesome because you get paid exactly what you're worth. Awesome. And you get to promote and consume the highest quality superfoods. I think that's it. And then my Instagram is raw_of_earth.
Awesome, man. I'm going to ask you two questions before we sign off that I ask everyone that comes on the podcast. Number one is, if you had one person or one book that inspired you the most your entire life, who would that person be, and what would that book be, and why?
Right. So book would probably be, man, this is really difficult. The book that I want to say is probably not going to have the same effect for a lot of people, but it's Manly P. Hall's Secret Teaching of All Ages, and Manly P. Hall basically gives like a 101 version of all of the religions and secret societies and occult sciences and people like Pythagoras and Hermes, and like that book is it takes a long time to read, but you actually see that it's all saying the same thing. Like every religion is saying the same thing. Everything boils, like base level boils down to the same thing. It's a very advanced book to read though, so you kind of need like an awareness of a lot of the stuff that's talked about the book before reading the book.
Got it.
But Manly P. Hall, and I mean, he even has some things on Audible, and he has a school here in LA actually, where I'm sure people like Einstein and Tesla all sat in. I'm going to double answer that question though. And then the other books were like the autobiographies of Van Gogh, and then the biographies of Einstein and Tesla and some other people. When I read all these people's autobiographies, I saw that like they struggled in their life. Einstein was like kicked out of school. He's given like a shitty job, and like nobody saw him as smart. Same thing with Van Gogh. And these people that we think are so great, they lived their entire life in agony and basically being beat down by all those around them. And even Van Gogh, I think, died as a virgin in an insane asylum. And that actually allowed me to be so much more comfortable in my life, in my existence, and dealing with quote haters, and realizing that like there doesn't need to be success in this life. Like these people, the reason why they're great is because they were tuned into what they're here to do, and they did it no matter what, even if they were poor to the day they died. Like that didn't matter. And that's why there's museums based on these guys, because they lived their human existence to the greatest degree possible. And so when you talk about like the things that we want, and like that's all just like those are choices and preferences, but being tuned into why you're here is really what's most important.
Oh yeah. What about a person? Do you have a person that inspired you the most, like one of your greatest teachers?
Not really, but if I would have to pick somebody, it would be one of my hockey coaches, this guy Marty. I don't even remember, like he should have been coaching at a higher level than us, but he kept on getting like basically kicked out of coaching teams because he was much like the people I just mentioned, like Van Gogh. Like people didn't like his approach, and they basically ousted him, and then he ended up coaching us in like a junior B team, and is like he should have been coaching the NHL, but he's like coaching us. And every drill he did, it was like, this is going to help you in hockey, and this is going to help you in life. And he was able to transcend the subject and like bring everything to like, this is important in this sport, and it's also going to help you in life, and really easily relay that information in a matter of like a couple words. Yeah. He wasn't like lecturing us on this stuff, but I feel myself doing that a lot. Because nothing's really specific, right? Yeah. Anything you're talking to somebody about applies to everything.
Yeah, love it, man. The other question I want to ask you is if there was one lesson that you've learned your entire life that maybe you had to learn the hard way, that like it took you like trials and tribulations to kind of get the message, that you could share with somebody like either a younger Raw or a younger person just coming up in the world, what would that lesson be that you'd want to share, and why?
I think it has to do with what I was just saying. So not get distracted by the people hating on you, even if it seems like it's well warranted. Even if you know that what you're doing is hurting other people's feelings and they're expressing that to you, it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
And that started because like I was doing a lot of things that I thought was good. So I had a newspaper article released about me in 2011 or something, 12. And it basically said I was abusing homeless people. It was completely written to attack CrossFit.
Right.
Because some people got fired from CrossFit. They organized this whole entire story. It was like 8 pages in the LA Weekly, and it was like all about how CrossFit's so bad because look at this guy. He's a CrossFit gym owner and he abuses all these homeless people. And it was like very well crafted and very easy to do because I had a lot of the pictures of the craziness that was happening in downtown LA there. Yeah. But like I had my gym around 4 bars, and most of the pictures were just drunk people that were like going nuts. But the way that the article was written was like I was abusing these homeless people, and there was one homeless picture out of the 10 that they displayed. There's one person who was homeless out of the 10 that they displayed. Everything else was like drunk people basically abusing me and my business, me just like laughing and turning it into a joke and taking a picture of it. It's like just people from the bars next door. Right. But in that scenario, I also had been like going into the projects and helping out little kids and helping out the LAPD, and I even like employed a homeless person. Like I basically all the things that I cared about was like basically I was made to look like I was the opposite of that. And I also had like kind of like a negative, like Dennis Rodman type
persona.
Yeah. In the community, so it was really easy to believe. Right. But yeah, I mean all that, like that really like taught me that the people that we can easily look at Justin Bieber and be like, that kid's a douchebag. Like back then Justin Bieber, like, everyone's like concerned that he's throwing eggs at his neighbor's house and right. things, and like even I mean the scenarios that we go to, even if we're like kind of screwing up, like they're like in the scenarios that we're in, like we don't have to feel bad about ourselves, like about it, because like now Justin Bieber's changing the world, right? Like he ascended through all of that childish behavior in a manner where everybody in the entire world witnessed it. Yeah. Imagine us, like I was able to hit mailboxes out of my truck window with my hockey stick and no one cared. Yeah. But imagine if like 30 million people, like I would have learned that lesson a lot better. So it's almost like the more kickback you get from reality, it's like, all right, this lesson is getting tuned into my being so much greater. Like I'm almost like glad I like, whether we deserve the hate or we don't, like respect it and be proud and happy it happened that way. And even when we're looking into the media and we're looking at other people experiencing their own life lessons, and it's really easy for us to look down on them, but really what's going to happen to them is they're going to come out so much greater. Right. So I mean a lot of my existence has to do with turning negative things into positive things, and this is just one of them. Like even if I screw up, like be happy it happened. Yeah. And that even like and other people's emotions being hurt, like that's part of my experience. And that's what I mentioned earlier, where like even if like you know that somebody else is victimizing you, like they might have needed to be the person doing something bad to somebody else so that they get the lesson that they get, so that they can grow and ascend as a human. And you needed to experience the pain and suffering that, like, you know, like we both experience the necessary need. Yeah. And like letting go of like, I was victimized by this person, they knew what they were doing, and then like you're never gonna be able to change that, right? Like yeah. And realizing that like they needed to do that to you perfectly for their human experience to go on, and you needed to experience the pain perfectly for your human experience to go on. And it just so happens to be that person did it to you, but like not be so attached to that, because we're both like just on trajectories and we met and had our experience and then we go on. Right. Don't still carry that with you. Like that's like one moment.
Totally. Well, dude, I loved this podcast, man. This is exactly what I was hoping it would be, to be honest with you, man. And I really hope the people that are listening to this, you know, have their eyes open as much as I have by talking with you. And if there's anything I can ever do to like help you along your journey through this life, I'm more than willing, and I truly do hope that our paths cross again much sooner than later, bud.
Yeah,
all right,
for
brother.
Sure.
See ya.
Sweet. Later.
Thank you for listening to My Backstory. Stay motivated and stay connected off the show. Follow at my_backstory_ to be a part of the journey to recovery and to see where your story goes. Or visit us online at hereismybackstory.com.